Chapter 592 Myriad Gauze Parasol. Chapter 592 Myriad Gauze Parasol. Reverie _ Brother. Big Metal Head hurriedly climbed up in a single movement, ran behind Ling Han, and said to Feng Wei-Chi in an extremely arrogant manner, the one surnamed Feng, seeing our big brother, why haven't you knelt down to pay respects? This guy was really a fox exploiting a tiger's might. Feng Wei-Chi instantly revealed a baleful expression. This guy who was always bootlicking actually dared to speak to him like this. The world really was turned upside down. He swept a glance at Ling Han with a grim smile, and said, Big Metal Head, which nerve of yours went wrong to actually rely on an immature brat? Nonsense. Ling Han's not smelly at all. Hunyo said indignantly while pointing at Feng Wei-Chi. Yes, Ling Han's not smelly at all. Helian Zun Shui also cried injustice, and even breathed deeply on Ling Han's body as proof, looking somewhat smitten. Brother, this guy actually dared to curse at you, beat him to death. Big Metal Head said ferociously, he already betrayed Feng Wei-Chi anyway, so he could only live if the latter died, and obviously wouldn't mind stabbing the other person. Ling Han laughed, and said, all right, you go. Big Metal Head was first delighted, but hearing the two words you go, he instantly revealed a bitter smile. If he could go, would Feng Wei-Chi even have the chance to be the boss? He hurriedly said, brother, I can't. How can men say no? Ling Han said seriously. Brother, I'm not a man. Big Metal Head said shamelessly. He'd rather have his stick sliced off than fight with Feng Wei-Chi. That would definitely end in death. Feng Wei-Chi now definitely hated him to the core. Go. Ling Han kicked Big Metal Head, who instantly flew out, ramming towards Feng Wei-Chi. You caught death. Feng Wei-Chi snorted. He took out a sanguine saber and sliced at Big Metal Head. 9 flashes of saber chi flew out, showing his impressive martial arts talent. Save me. Big Metal Head unleashed his weapon to ward off blows whilst shouting. He was only in the 2nd layer of the Flower Blossom tier, but Feng Wei-Chi was at the 9th layer, and even reached the peak stage. As he couldn't break through to the spiritual infant tier, he sharpened his cultivation at the Flower Blossom tier to an extremely solid level, and reached a battle prowess of 15 stars. Big Metal Head wasn't at genius level, so how could he be well matched? In only 2 moves, he was struck flying by the saber, and blood splattered as he fell beside Ling Han's feet with a paw. Why have you come back? Didn't I make you cut off that guy's damn head? Ling Han said with a smile and kicked once more. Big Metal Head spat out blood while hugging tightly onto Ling Han's feet and weeping. Brother, I'll really die if I fight anymore. Hugging so tightly means you still have strength, and aren't lacking ability to fight. Ling Han launched his foot again, kicking Big Metal Head out. Big Metal Head might look pitiful and obedient, but thinking about the dirty dealings he'd done, why show sympathy for such a person? Just let the 2 dogs bite each other. Boss, I was wrong. Big Metal Head betrayed once again, kneeling before Feng Wei-Chi. Boss, I had no other way. This brat was going to bust my anus, so I had no choice but to betray you. In truth, my heart was always with you, boss, and there was never a moment where I thought of betraying. Even Feng Wei-Chi shivered. He'd seen shameless people, but never one so shameless. He laughed grimly, and said, since that's so, you can take revenge by killing that brat. Big Metal Head raised his head, stunned all over the face. There was no playing like this, both having him take the vanguard when he was only so capable. They thought too highly of him. Not going. Feng Wei-Chi's eyes beamed with an ominous glint as he clenched the saber in his hand a little tighter. I'll go. I'm a bastard if I don't go. Big Metal Head hurriedly stood up and turned to face Ling Han, wearing a sour expression as tears flowed out. He walked towards Ling Han, but after a few steps, he said, brother, boss, how about everyone sit down, drink tea and chat, and discuss martial arts? Get out the way. Feng Wei-Chi was first to find it unbearable, hacking with the saber from behind. Big Metal Head was instantly cut into 2 parts. He looked coldly at Ling Han, and said, since you've come here, don't think of going out. Is that so? Ling Han smiled slightly, and observed the surroundings. What is this place? Does a dead man need to know so much? Feng Wei-chi said coldly, and took out an umbrella, small and dainty. He tossed it up in the air, and it automatically opened, revolving round and continuously enlarging. Since I'm a dead man, then what does it matter if I know a little more? Ling Han said with a smile. Like I said, a dead man doesn't need to know that much. Feng Wei-chi shouted sharply, and that parasol instantly unleashed a strange power. All space that was shrouded by it underwent a strange change. Ling Han was slightly surprised, because he suddenly couldn't feel the 5 elements spiritual qi. Ha 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 ha, discovered what's wrong? Feng Wei-chi laughed loudly. This was left from the ancient period. It's myriad gauze parasol, which can blot out the sun and cover the sky. Now, I've covered the 5 elements spiritual qi with myriad gauze parasol. Flower blossom tear warriors are strong because they can draw the blessing of heaven and earth spiritual qi with every strike and erupt with 100 times their power. But now, the 5 elements spiritual qi has been eclipsed by myriad gauze parasol, and when you can't borrow power, you're only a tiny bit stronger than the spiritual pedestal tear warrior. Ling Han was astounded, and said, this truly is a good thing. He also cultivated physical arts concurrently. If the 5 elements and thunder spiritual qi were all obstructed, then he could still fight a spiritual infant tear with his own brute force, right? Die. Feng Wei-chi charged over, and as the saber swept by, the power of lightning was raised. No wonder you chose to obstruct the 5 elements spiritual qi. So you actually cultivate the power of lightning. Ling Han suddenly realized. He drew his sword to greet the enemy. As expected, the 5 elements spiritual qi had been obstructed, and his sword attack couldn't receive the boost of heaven and earth spiritual qi, deceasing sharply in power. That's right. Unfortunately, you found out too late. Feng Wei-chi brandished the sanguine saber. With a ding, the treasured sword cut the sanguine sword, erupting with a chain of sparks. What? Feng Wei-chi revealed a shocked look. Under this attack, Ling Han actually didn't get sent flying. Could it be so coincidental that this brat also cultivated thunder-type arts, so he luckily didn't get restrained? Wrong, that sword had no thunder spiritual qi. How can you block my saber? He couldn't help but ask. Want to know? Ling Han laughed loudly. Use the secrets here to exchange. Don't dream. Feng Wei-chi shouted loudly, and swung the saber at Ling Han again. Ling Han sighed, and said, don't be so sure, or else it'll be awkward later. Die. 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 Feng Wei-chi roared, and kept swinging the saber, trying to cut down Han on spot. Ling Han was fearless. His physical art improved quickly, and was not far from the level of his origin power. Even in the situation where he couldn't borrow heaven and earth spiritual qi, he still possessed 15 stars or so of battle prowess. Once he became serious, Feng Wei-chi immediately fell into a disadvantage. Chapter 593 Ancient Dynasties Treasure Vault. Chapter 593 Ancient Dynasties Treasure Vault. Reverie _ Exchanging less than 10 blows, Ling Han knocked away the sanguine saber from Feng Wei-chi, and placed the sword on his neck. He laughed mischievously, and said, now can we talk? If you want to kill, then kill. Feng Wei-chi actually didn't show any sign of fear. He looked coldly at Ling Han. But, you'll also die soon. Oh, could you possibly know how to cast curses? Ling Han said with a smile. If Feng Wei-chi really had a treasure like the bottle of curse, he might have some scruples. My son is a spiritual infant tier elite, and a peak stage spiritual infant tier at that. Feng Wei-chi laughed loudly. When you kill me, he'll immediately sense it, and no matter where you hide, he'll find you and kill you. I really thought you weren't afraid of death. After all that, you're still threatening me to make me not kill you. Ling Han shook his head, patted him on the face with a smile, and said, who doesn't fear death? Being able to live fine, of course no one wants to die. You can tell me about the situation here. We don't have any grievances anyway, so it's not like I can't spare your life. Feng Wei-chi sneered, and said, don't imagine it. There were definitely no false words in what I just said. My son is Absolute Saber Sect's small saber king. If you don't believe it, you can ask anyone. Ling Han stroked his chin, and said, usually, I've only seen the second-generation juniors brandishing their parents' banner to act recklessly. Never had I thought that I'd have encountered one who relied on his son's reputation to act like a tyrant. It really has refreshed my outlook of life. He knocked out Feng Wei-Chi with a single palm and stored him inside the Black Tower, planning to properly interrogate him. This parasol is so beautiful. Losing Feng Wei-Chi's control, that parasol fell down from the sky and was held in Helian Zun Shue's hand as she fondled it admiringly. Ling Han approached to take a glance, then couldn't help but frown, and said, "This doesn't seem like the original, but a replica." The parasol handle and the canopy had vein-like patterns carved on them, but the marks were very new and didn't seem like an ancient article. If this spirit tool was newly crafted, then there wouldn't be just one. Moreover, these materials were only of the 6th tier. Did that mean that if there were 7th tier, or 8th tier materials, a stronger myriad gauze parasol could be made? This Feng Wei-Chi needed to be investigated carefully. Ling Han and Hu Niu entered the Black Tower, while Helian Zun Shui could only sulk again. Ling Han looked at Feng Wei-Chi and said in a calm tone, "Tell me all the details about this cave." "Haha, you're dreaming." Feng Wei-Chi seemed quite a ruffian, but there was still fear in his eyes. Suddenly arriving at this inexplicable place from the cave was beyond common sense, making him involuntarily feel fear. Could he have lost consciousness for many days? Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "In here, no one can say no to me, and you're obviously no exception. I have all the ways to torment you, just see how long you can preserve. Bring it on. If I say anything in weakness, then I may be tch." Feng Wei-Chi said with his neck raised. "After half a day. I'll talk, I'll say anything." Feng Wei-Chi screamed tragically. In this half a day, he suffered various unimaginable tortures: burning, drowning, burying and making him die, then come to life, and then die. It was truly worse than death, and he couldn't even die even if he wanted to. He now only sought to be freed. "You really are Small Saber King's old man?" Ling Han asked. "Yes, I'm really his father," Feng Wei-Chi said, gasping for breath. His eyes already lost focus, as if he'd become foolish. "Why did you come here?" Ling Han asked. "When my son was exploring historic sites, he discovered clues about this place. He came here first and received a few ancient articles," Feng Wei-Chi replied. "But my son is focused on cultivating, so I came here to manage the excavation project." "What is this place exactly?" "I'm not too sure, either. I only know that it belongs to an ancient dynasty from hundreds of thousand years ago," Feng Wei-Chi said. However, it was what he said next that jolted Ling Han's mind. That ancient dynasty wanted to open the skies and transport the entire vast lands into the God realm, but failed. This place is only a treasure vault of that ancient dynasty in its former years. Opening the sky, it was about opening the sky again. Ling Han was shocked. That ancient dynasty was truly bold and daring in seeking to ascend with the entire vast lands into God realm, making all mortals divine citizens. Thinking about it gave one the feeling of being on pins and needles. "Say, how many treasures have you dug out from here?" Feng Wei-Chi explained one by one, and as Ling Han listened, he was more and more shocked. This place had primarily puppets. Other than gold, silver, and iron, there was a diamond puppet, though it was only one, and was long taken away by Small Saber King. If this type of puppet were to fully unleash its might, it was equivalent to a deity transformation tier elite, and what was more terrifying was that it possessed a considerable intelligence. Additionally, gold, silver, and iron skin puppets were far from the amount that Ling Han saw, and all were taken away by Small Saber King. As for what Small Saber King wanted to do, Feng Wei-Chi didn't know, either. He was only excavating this historic site in his son's stead. Other than the puppets, the battleships that Ling Han saw previously were only divided into two types of gold and black. The black battleship could pose a threat to the Flower Blossom tier elites, and there were 100 vessels of this kind. The golden battleship could annihilate spiritual infant tier warriors, but there were only 10 vessels. This place only had one left, though, as the others were all in the hands of Small Saber King. Fortunately, this golden battleship wasn't by Feng Wei-Chi's side, otherwise, Ling Han wouldn't have taken down Feng Wei-Chi so easily, and would instead be hunted down. The golden battleship was not only more powerful, but was also a flying-type treasure. It was only 100 meters long and flew extremely fast, but also exhausted a lot of origin crystals. Blackwood Island was well fortified, so Feng Weiqi never thought that he would have the need to use this large-scale spirit tool. Other than this, there were various practical spirit tools like the Myriad Gauze Parasol. This certainly was a replica, because the real article was already damaged, but even the replica could still make deity transformation tier elites unable to sense spiritual Qian extremely terrifying thing. Ling Han exclaimed inwardly, just how powerful and prosperous was this ancient dynasty. This was only one of their treasure vaults, but the various treasures excavated here already made him shocked. However, the most important was still that obelisk. It was said to be related to a mystical power, and only this obelisk hadn't been unearthed over the 3 years. The power of lightning was too frightening, greatly affecting the undertaking's progression. From the information Small Saber King obtained, that ancient dynasty had a total of 4 mystical powers, sealed separately in 4 treasure vaults. The one here was called Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and was the weakest of the 4. The most formidable one was called Nine Deaths Heaven Art, and had the ability to disrupt life and death. Small Saber King cared very much about this mystical power, and would inquire about the excavation of the obelisk from time to time. If it weren't for his special identity, he'd actually rather personally keep watch. Now, I've got quite the bargain, Ling Han said. Chapter 594, Thunderclap Ninth Heaven. Chapter 594, Thunderclap Ninth Heaven. Reverie _ Ling Han exited the Black Tower and arrived in front of the obelisk. The workers already dispersed in fright, and it was absolutely empty here. Han, you're ignoring me again, Helian Zun Shui said with a disconsolate expression, appearing really upset. Ling Han was speechless. This Hainyo had been aggressive, condescending, and extremely domineering back then, but now she was actually like a doormat. The discrepancy before and after was so great that he couldn't get used to it. Facing such a Helian Zun Shui, it was very hard for him to connect her with that domineering princess before and have any killing intent towards her. This is a tremendous muddle. Ling Han sighed. He really didn't know how the two would end after Helian Zun Shui recovered her memory. Helian Zun Shui pulled on the hem of Ling Han's clothes, revealing a content smile on her delicate face. She was a little lady, desiring too little. No one's digging, guess I'll have to do it myself, Ling Han said. He wasn't the type that liked to enslave people, and since the workers all ran, he wouldn't capture those people to get them to continue to work. Hunyo also appeared. The little girl's claws were extremely sharp, and using them to dig, they couldn't be better. The workers from earlier didn't dare to get too close, and excavated 30 meters away, forming a deep pit. Feng Weiqi fired Saber Qi with the Sanguine Saber and sliced away from afar, cutting off the stones on top of the obelisk, so the progression was extremely slow. Ling Han took large strides forward, and the obelisk was as if it came to life, with flashes of lightning intertwining. Suddenly, a flash of lightning fired out, striking Ling Han. Ling Han was instantly sent flying, with black smoke rising from his body, and his flesh was actually somewhat burnt. It was truly frightening. His physique was on the level of a 6th-tier rare metal, yet was actually burnt with a single strike. The power of the lightning was not to be underestimated. With a thought, Ling Han immediately activated the Thunder Battle Armor. It was rather interesting to see how things would end if he pitted lightning against lightning. He advanced once again, and another flash of lightning was released. This time, the Thunder Battle Armor unleashed its might and blocked it, and they interwove with each other and formed a densely packed white current. The sight was very shocking. The Thunder Battle Armor seemed to have activated on its own, and carried out an arts battle with the obelisk. That power was already far beyond what Ling Han could wield, and the entire cave was full of lightning. The current was like a whip, lashing the cave's walls, leaving deep gashes on them. The entire cave was trembling as if it were about to collapse. Fun! Hunyo shouted cheerfully and rushed over. Go back! Ling Han hurriedly shouted. He could only resist relying on the Thunder Battle Armor, or else he would definitely go into the Black Tower. The little girl was freakish, but she probably couldn't resist such powers of lightning. However, against his expectations, Hunyo was actually in the lightning as if nothing had happened. Not only so, She also seemed to become the center of the lightning as her body turned into a bottomless pit, absorbing the endless lightning. Ling Han, Nyo feels so strange. Hu Nyo said. In her eyes were strange arbitrary scenes. There was the annihilation of stars, the death of elites, emitting the endless vicissitudes along with boundless pressure. Hellion Zun Shui shivered. Even if she was actually a heaven-tier elite, she couldn't resist this pressure and sat abruptly onto the ground, shedding cold sweat like rain. Ling Han also almost knelt down, but Black Tower vibrated lightly in his dantian and emitted a supreme presence, expelling Hu Nyo's coercive pressure and making him return to normal. Hu Nyo, hurry up and withdraw from there. Ling Han already knew this lightning couldn't harm Hu Nyo, but her change was also extremely strange. Moreover, he always had a hidden worry whether Hu Nyo's human-shaped spirit base would revive and take over Hu Nyo. Z. The obelisk and the thunder battle armor shone brilliantly, and the vein-like patterns on them continued to disintegrate. In an instant, all the lightning disappeared, and the entire cave became pitch black. The torches were all extinguished by the lightning. In the darkness, Hu Nyo's entire body glowed and emitted a shocking aura. At this moment, she was no longer the gluttonous little girl. It was as if she reincarnated into a supreme being that could shatter the highest of heavens and penetrate the depths of hell. If it weren't for the support of the Black Tower, Ling Han would definitely be lying on the ground without even the strength to move a finger. It was clear just by seeing Hellion Zun Shui, who already shrunk into a ball, not even raising her head. The thunder battle armor on Ling Han shattered into pieces and decayed. The essence within the battle armor was drawn completely, turning a 10th-tier material into scrap iron. The obelisk also suffered heavy damage as its lightning power became extremely weak. Hu Nyo fell straight onto the ground, falling unconscious. Ling Han hurriedly ran over and carried the little girl in his arms, sensing her aura. Fortunately, she only fell unconscious, and the various functions of the body were not damaged at all. Where exactly did this little girl come from? Ling Han sighed and held back his curiosity, placing the little girl into the Black Tower. Hellion Zun Shui stood up. Her gaze seemed somewhat hazy, and her entire person was also somewhat out of it as she walked towards the obelisk. Her mind was now somewhat unclear as she reached out with her delicate hands and pressed onto the part of the obelisk that was laid bare outside the rocks. You're also going crazy? Ling Han hurriedly leapt over, wanting to pull her back, but this girl's physical strength was also extremely frightening. He actually couldn't pull her back. Hellion Zun Shui's hand already pressed onto the obelisk, and instantly, Ling Han only felt a mighty memory shock, forming a munificent sight before him. A martial artist physical turned into lightning and battled fiercely in the skies. He was truly powerful. Whenever he suffered an attack, his body of lightning could evade the attacks, and when releasing punches, the power of lightning erupted, annihilating everything. Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, a mystical power. Originally, this mystical power was protected by the power of lightning, and definitely couldn't be learnt so easily, but the thunder battle armor and the obelisk had formed an intriguing interaction. Then, Hu Nyo entered randomly and absorbed a large amount of the lightning power. The obelisk also lost its protection, and the mystical power legacy was inherited easily. Characters shone in Ling Han's consciousness. He was now cuddled with Hellion Zun Shui, so this thunderclap Ninth Heaven's legacy simultaneously fell on the both of them, turning the body into lightning and shattering all of time. The remaining lightning power intertwined on their bodies, and turned their clothes into flying ash, their bodies entangled and melted into one. Under the impact of this mystical power memory, Ling Han also became dazed. It was as if he had a strange dream and turned into a dragon knight, trying to subdue a restless dragon, tangling and fighting. At last, he obviously won and rode on the dragon, speeding along and feeling great. Dazzled, he fell into slumber because of exhaustion, and endless lightning in his consciousness turned into lightning symbols, the essence of Thunderclap Ninth Heaven. Chapter 595 Hainyo disappeared. Chapter 595 Hainyo disappeared. Reverie _ Ling Han woke up, feeling refreshed. He got up and couldn't help but let out a sound of surprise. Discovering that he was without a piece of clothing, he hurriedly took out clothes from the Black Tower to wear. He remembered, under the intertwining lightning, The clothes on his body certainly broke into pieces. After all, the thunder battle armor was destroyed. He couldn't help but cry inwardly in pity. That was a 10th tier spirit tool, and although it was damaged, it was still a precious treasure. Where's Hainyo? Ling Han's gaze swept about, but he couldn't find that pushover young woman. How strange, this girl stuck to him all day, but actually had times where she disappeared. Where did she run off to? Ling Han summoned Hu Nyo and Zhu Shen from the Black Tower. This little girl certainly was a freak, waking up after sleeping for a short while, and thoughtlessly acting as if nothing had happened. Hu Nyo, do you feel any different? Ling Han asked. Hu Nyo titled her head as she thought for a while, and said, Nyo knows this now. Her right hand raised up, a flash of lightning fired out and turned into an electric arc, and the mountain wall instantly had a huge hole in it. Thunderclap 9th heaven? Ling Han was astounded. He'd only received this mystical power's legacy, but this little girl could actually use it. Whatever. This little girl was awfully strange, but it was alright as long as she was fine. Ling Han went to look at the obelisk again, but discovered that the stone tablet was already broken into 10 chunks, while the symbols on them dimmed and blurred. He pressed his hand onto it, but the broken stone immediately shattered, turning into debris. The legacy was already gone, acquired by him and Helian Zun Shui, and others would have no opportunity with this wonderful technique. If Ling Han wanted to impart it to others, then it would have to be after he'd cultivated this mystical power to grand mastery, branding it with immense power. Now, he couldn't replicate it at all, because he didn't have the verbal chant illustrations. He received the pure Dao process. Strange, why has that Hainyo not returned? Ling Han said to himself, and called out loudly for a while. The echoes were ceaseless, but the girl never showed up. The three began to search, and couldn't find her all along. This result made Hu Nyo very happy because she never had the advantage in the contests against Helian Zun Shui. Now that this woman disappeared, she obviously couldn't wait to celebrate. Helian Zun Shui couldn't be found, but the golden battleship was another story. It was unknown what material the ship was forged from, being only 10 meters long and about 3 wide. There was actually a refined hold, so rather than calling it a battleship, it was better described as a simplified moving imperial residence. On the ship there certainly was an origin crystal cannon installed, being able to compress and fire the power within origin crystals, its destructive power shocking. However, it also burned origin crystals like there was no tomorrow. The attack would equal the level of the origin crystals used, though the upper limit was the spiritual infant tier. After Ling Han mulled over it for a while, he soon understood how to use this battleship. Pouring his divine sense into a crystal at the prow, one would be able to control it freely, relying on the power of origin crystals to sail and fly. A good thing, just that it burns too many origin crystals. Ling Han nodded. With this thing, he'd never need a carriage on a journey, and it was also very fast. Ruining the thunder battle armor in exchange for a mystical power plus this treasured tool is not a loss, Ling Han said, but was still a little regretful. The thunder battle armor had been quite handy. Could that foolish girl have run off on her own? The three exited the cave and searched again, but still couldn't find a trace of Helian Zun Shui. Let's stay here for 3 days, and if we still don't see that foolish chick, let's go. Ling Han made a decision. These 3 days obviously wouldn't be wasted. Ling Han began to cultivate the thunderclap 9th heaven. Infinite symbols circulated in his consciousness, converting into his comprehension. However, it couldn't be put into words, as it surpassed their level. The legacies of mystical powers weren't conveyed through words, but another medium. The Eye of Truth, for example, was in an eyeball, the exterminating dragon star arrow was in a statue, and the thunderclap 9th heaven was in an obelisk. 3 days went by in a flash. As Ling Han raised his right hand, a flash of lightning sparkled with zzz sounds. Sadly, I don't have thunder spirit base. If I had, then combined with the thunderclap 9th heaven, the power would be a little stronger. Ling Han shook his head and sighed. This mystical power was truly extraordinary, though he only realized the smattering of it and could only fire out lightning. After cultivating it to a certain degree, he could turn his body into lightning, not only being able to evade direct power impacts, but also having ridiculous speed. Not all attacks could be avoided, but just those of pure power. That was because no matter how strong a force was, it was impossible to injure lightning. However, flames, frost, and other elemental attacks could still pose a threat to a body of lightning. As to what damage could be done, that would depend on how the battle prowess of the two parties compared. Losing the thunder battle armor but gaining a body of lightning is obviously a loss in the short term, but from a long-term point of view, it's well worth it. Armor is, after all, merely something external, and it was already damaged and unable to unleash its full power. However, I still have a long ways to go before turning my body into lightning. Ling Han shook his head and stood up. 3 days had passed, but there was still no trace of Helian Zun Shui. She seemed to have really disappeared. Strange, could this foolish girl's memory have been restored? Ling Han muttered. Doesn't seem right. If her memory was restored, why would she let me go? Other things aside, after these days, she definitely knows that I have a treasure that can accommodate living things. Moreover, she doesn't want the vial of curses anymore. Strange, a foolish girl's thoughts are out of the ordinary as expected, and can't be guessed with common sense. The world was too big, and if someone really wanted to disappear, how could they be found? Ling Han could also conclude that he was with Helian Zun Shui not long ago, receiving the mystical powers legacy together. After they received large amounts of memories, they both fell unconscious. Helian Zun Shui was probably first to wake up, but this girl chose to leave. If they were enemies, shouldn't he have been killed by her on the way out? Whatever, let's leave it. She's an enemy anyway, so it's better that she left, Ling Han said to himself. However, people had feelings, and after interacting for such a long time, suddenly missing someone who pulled on the hem of his clothes all day was really something he was unused to. They boarded the golden ship. After Ling Han set sail, it immediately floated up and flew at a surprisingly fast speed. From an outside perspective, it was a streamlined ship, but looking out from within the hold, it was transparent, so the view completely unaffected. It was extremely miraculous. The three of them were filled with wonder for a while, but soon became indifferent, switching to sleeping or eating meat, whichever it was what they needed at a given moment. At some point, Hunyo suddenly clapped her hands, and said, "What a large snake." Ling Han turned his head to look, and saw that a leviathan suddenly rose from the lake bed. The parts of it that were revealed were like a mountain, terrifyingly massive, and despite being in the ship, Ling Han still felt a frightening pressure, while Zhu Xian'er leaned in his embrace, weak and powerless. That 1,000-year-old flood dragon. Let's run. This big guy isn't in the heaven tier. I fear it's already advanced into the shattering void tier. Ling Han hurriedly sped up the ship. Chapter 596, Small Saber King arrives. Chapter 596, Small Saber King arrives. Reverie _ Fortunately, this large flood dragon didn't care about them at all, and immersed itself in the lake after turning over. That mountain-like figure instantly was nowhere to be seen. Ling Han let out a sigh of relief. If they were targeted by this beast, then the golden ship definitely wouldn't be safe, and they could only immediately hide inside the black tower. The golden ship soared through the sky. 7 days later, they left the giant lake. Middle State is a lot larger than the other 4 regions, Ling Han exclaimed. In the previous life, the entire vastlands were a whole. It was much unlike now, when they were separated by regions, making it difficult for elites to be in contact. Yeah, it's said that only added together do the 4 regions compare to the Middle State in size, Zhu Xian'er said. Hunyo shrunk inside Ling Han's embrace, and was very rarely not causing any disturbance nor being a chowhound. She was overly quiet, which made Ling Han distressed. Ever since this little girl absorbed the power of the obelisk and the thunder battle armor, she would stare blankly now and again, appearing absent-minded. They continued to fly towards the flying Blossom County. Ling Han and Zhu Xian'er took turns controlling the ship. Hunyo couldn't be counted on. If she were to control the ship, then she might actually go south by sailing north, traveling further and further away. When Ling Han wasn't controlling the ship, he dove into the study of the thunderclap 9th heaven. In over a dozen days, he made noticeable progress, and although he couldn't turn his body into lightning, his speed clearly increased. However, according to legends, To truly master Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, one must endure thunder strikes and draw the power of thunder to change one's body so as to turn it into lightning. But as to how to guide the power of lightning, I still have no grasp of it. Continuing without careful consideration, I fear that I'd only be struck dead by lightning. This matter can't be rushed. I must have a sure grasp of it. With my comprehension, I'll be able to test it in at most 1 month. Sigh, taking thunderbolts. What sins have I committed? Ling Han sighed. Just when he was mocking himself, he felt an intense sense of danger, and hurriedly deviated from the golden ship's original course. Xiao, a flash of saber chi swept down. The saber light was world-shaking, as if even the stars in the skies could be struck down. This sudden turn made Zhu Xian and Hunyo stumble. What happened? Zhu Xian hurriedly asked. We're under attack. Which damned guy dares to assault the cute Nyo? Hunyo burst into anger and looked outside through the golden ship. 300 meters away, a man stood in the sky. He looked to be in the 20s, resplendent light surged over his entire body, turning into various saber shapes. With a slight lift, the space was torn apart, and it was extremely terrifying. Spiritual infant tier. Moreover, he hadn't just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, but was at the 9th layer of the spiritual infant tier. It was even possible that he already had 1 foot into the deity transformation tier. This person didn't look that young, but after increasing his tier, the changes in his complexion also became quite slow. Combined with his tier and how fierce his chi and blood burned, this person was at least over 30, and whether or not he reached 40 couldn't be determined. After all, without testing one's bone age, only the approximate age could be inferred. However, even if he was 40, this person's achievements could be considered outstanding. Ling Han was the alchemy emperor in his previous life, and increased his strength by taking medicine, but he'd only reached the flower blossom tier at that age. In this lifetime, the world's environment changed, and any random genius could break the records of his previous lifetime. Ling Han didn't leave the cabin and asked indifferently, "Hey, on such a fine day, is it really good for you to attack people like that without grudges nor grievances? Since you're inside this golden ship, we're not without grudges nor grievances," the man said coldly. Such great nerve, daring to covet my things. Ling Han was astounded, and said, "You're small saber king. Since you know of my reputation, release my father and then suicide as an apology," the man said loftily, not denying his entity. Ling Han suddenly came to a realization. Oh, wonder the other person launched an attack once he saw the golden ship. Other people didn't recognize this golden ship, but how could he not? Presumably, the man had already been to the cave and discovered that the obelisk disappeared along with any signs of Feng Wei Qi. Thus, he naturally chased over. However, his speed was truly fast. Being behind a few days, he still caught up with them despite the golden ship's speed. He couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, the world was so large, but the golden ship was so small, so for him to be able to chase over with such precision, he must have other methods. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Ancient remnants belong to everyone that have the chance to get them. You got it first, then that's your luck, but heaven led me to the place of the treasure vault, and that's also my luck. I only know that that's mine, and whoever touches it, dies." Small Saber King's glare turned sharp as he struck out fiercely with a hand chop. The light on his body was raised and turned into a heavenly saber that slashed towards the golden ship. Ling Han never stopped the golden ship and continued to oscillate with it. At this moment, he didn't need to speed up and just fled by, evading the heavenly saber. Hong! The heavenly saber struck down, and the landscape below was instantly leveled. Ling Han saw a human village affected, the living spirits exterminated. He couldn't help but be furious, and said, "Small Saber King, this is a grievance between you and me, why involve innocent people? That's real funny. Mere moles and crickets. So what if 1,000 or 10,000 of them died? Even if they don't die now, in the future." Small Saber King stopped suddenly, and revealed a grim smile. "Since you're so soft-hearted, why don't you fight me? I don't care whether or not I kill those nobodies below." Ling Han wouldn't fall for his provocations. Although his battle prowess was exceptional and he could even contend against a low-level spiritual infant tier elite after taking a pill, Small Saber King was a peak-stage spiritual infant tier, and a genius amongst geniuses. His battle prowess probably almost reached the deity transformation tier. Small Saber King should be a veteran genius that was half a generation older than Yarrow Huiyu, and fighting him head-on was definitely courting death. However, he was obviously absolute Saber Sect's disciple, so how could he slaughter as he pleased? "You aren't going to take my life, then?" Ling Han said coldly. "You want to hunt me down, then do as you wish, but if you harm any more innocent people, I won't mind killing your old man." Small Saber King thought over it slightly, and said, "Release my father and return the obelisk, then I can let you live." Obelisk? Already shattered into pieces, give my *s. Alright, we'll compromise. Your old man I can return to you, he's just a waste of food here anyway. But, I can't give you that obelisk. Ling Han said with a smile. Not to mention that it was already broken, even if it were whole, Ling Han still wouldn't hand it over. Small Saber King was already frightening enough, and if he were to receive a new mystical power, the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, who in the world could stop him? With this person's nature, he'd definitely become a demon in the future. Chapter 597, Cross Swords. Chapter 597, Cross Swords. Reverie _ Temph. The obelisk must be handed over. Small Saber King said coldly. This mystical power was the most valuable thing inside the treasure vault. He obtained the other treasures, and clearly knew how amazing the effects of these treasures were, so he obviously desired the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven even more. But I don't want to hand it over, so what to do? Ling Han said with a smile. Small Saber King revealed a threatening killing intent, and raised his palm again, the killing intent almost tangible. Small Saber King, you really want to be an unfilial son? Ling Han said with a frown. Sure. Small Saber King waved his hand, and a saber light struck out, changing into a world-shaking heavenly saber again, slashing towards the golden ship. This definitely surpassed the level of saber chi and rose to the level of rather destructive power was extremely frightening. It could be inferred from the power of the slash earlier that Small Saber King's saber ray was condensed with at least 20 flashes of chi. This was only a rough estimate. Small Saber King might not have gone all out, so the power of his saber ray might be even stronger, perhaps it reached 29 flashes, or even the height of 30 flashes of chi. Ling Han was unable to rival him. As the saber light slashed by, the mountains and rivers below suffered once again, another human village was involved, then turned into dust in its entirety. Small Saber King, Ling Han said word by word. He'd seen quite a few ruthless people, but not to care about human life in this way, killing at will like wiping off dust, was truly a first-time encounter for him. This was absolute Saber Sect's disciple. In the former years, although Sunset Saber Emperor was cold-hearted, his saber only struck at elites. Never would he attack the weak, and attacking normal people was beneath him. 2 generations of geniuses, both were clearly exceptional, but their temperaments were so different. Ling Han was furious, and said, Xian control the ship to hit that bastard. I'll restrain him. Brother Han, be careful. Zhu Xian warned with a worried look on her delicate face. She obviously didn't doubt Ling Han's strength and talent, but Small Saber King cultivated for many more years than Ling Han, this was a major shortcoming. Ling Han exited the cabin and faced off coldly against Small Saber King. Hunyo also appeared, with her 2 small hands on her hips, also extremely angry, truly tired of living. This bastard actually dared to attack the cute Lord Nyo Nyo. Small Saber King stared at Ling Han for a while, and suddenly shouted, What, you're Ling Han? Didn't think I was that famous. Ling Han said unenthusiastically. Heaven-grade alchemists are still quite rare, Small Saber King said indifferently. But in my eyes, so what if you're a heaven-grade alchemist? I hear you received the 12 Palaces legacy and the whereabouts of a divine treasure trove. I'm not interested in the 12 Palaces legacy, but I still do have some interest in the divine treasure trove. How about this? Hand over the whereabouts of the obelisk and the divine treasure trove, and I'll not only let you live, but also give you a treasure. How about it? Ling Han sneered, and said, Nothing about it. I don't deal with beast. Xiao, at this moment, Zhu Xian'er was already prepared, and Origin Crystal Cannon immediately fired towards Small Saber King extremely quickly. Saber light flashed, a field of brilliance. Unknowingly, Small Saber King unleashed a cyan-colored long saber and slashed apart the Origin Crystal shell, which swept separately by his two sides. He was enveloped by saber chi, looking like a god, his presence terrifyingly shocking. Want to harm me with just this golden dragon ship? Small Saber King's expression was indifferent, and his gaze fierce, also like the heavenly saber. Go die, take Nyo's thunderbolt bullet. Hu Nyo's small hand flicked. ZZ, two flashes of lightning immediately shot towards Small Saber King. These two flashes of lightning were actually faster than the Origin Crystal shell earlier. Lightning was the fastest in the world to begin with. Small Saber King slashed straight across. Pu, the saber ray was unleashed, but it was extinguished with the two flashes of lightning. This made Ling Han and Small Saber King greatly shocked. After all, Small Saber King was a peak stage spiritual infant tier elite, and even cultivated saber ray, while Hu Nyo was only in the flower blossom tier, and didn't even have chi. However, the two people's attacks were both destroyed, showing that the power of their attacks were not too far apart. This absolutely overturned the common sense in martial arts. Small Saber King was both furious and shocked. That attack was obviously not his full strength, but it definitely shouldn't have ended that way. However, this only made him shocked momentarily, and after seeing the two flashes of lightning, he exploded even more with anger. My legacy was actually stolen by this little girl. He was absolutely going mad. Inside the ancient dynasty's treasure vault, the most precious thing was obviously the legacy of Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and according to the information he'd received, there was only one chance to obtain the inheritance. Once the legacy was passed on, the obelisk would self-destruct, never allowing a second person to obtain it. After scheming for 3 years, the great task should soon have been accomplished, but suddenly it was like a direct blow to the head. How could he not be bursting with anger? I'll kill you all and directly search your souls. Small Saber King said balefully. The legacy couldn't be expressed in words or characters, so if he wanted to obtain Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, he could only search the soul. Wretch, you won't get the chance. Ling Han said coldly. Watch Nyo's awesomeness. Hu Nyo shouted, and moved both hands repeatedly as lightning attacks were unleashed one after another, bombarding Small Saber King like raindrops. She was truly a freak. Ling Han just grasped a bit of the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, being quite away from using it in practice to harm enemies, but this little girl could already use it with ease, absolutely incredible. Perhaps this also had to do with the intertwinement of the lightning. She almost completely absorbed the lightning in the Thunder Battle armor and the obelisk at the same time, allowing her to skip the step of being struck by lightning to directly operating the mystical power with ease. Small Saber King snorted and brandished his long saber, firing saber rays that swept towards the golden ship one after another. Peng, peng, peng. Although Zhu Xian'er evaded in every way possible, the saber rays were too concentrated, and it was unavoidable that a few attacks would land. Fortunately, the golden ship had a single-layered shield, which could block the attacks of spiritual infant tier elites after being fully activated. However, after several hits, the shield trembled, being on the verge of breaking. Hu Nyo shouted loudly and initiated an attack. As her figure flashed, she turned into a flash of lightning and charged towards Small Saber King, instantly appearing before him. Her small fists fired out, enveloped by lightning. Impudence! Small Saber King snorted and brandished his saber, trying to cut Hu Nyo in half at the waist. Small Saber King! Ling Han roared. The sunset bow was unleashed and the arrow was mounted, and as endless origin power gathered, the entire arrow turned into a white light. He already activated the Eye of Truth and found the most fragile region of Small Saber King's defense. Small Saber King originally wanted to cut Hu Nyo in two, but after discovering that Ling Han was accumulating power, his expression changed drastically. He didn't dare underestimate this arrow, as the momentum of his saber slowed slightly. Xiao, Ling Han fired out an arrow. The fierce arrow penetrated the sky and almost disregarded the distance, immediately arriving in front of Small Saber King. However, Small Saber King was truly formidable. Even under such circumstances, he still swung his saber, firing out a world-shocking saber ray. Peng! The arrow was instantly deflected forcibly, and its straight shaft actually appeared to be bent. Chapter 598 – A Puppet Appears. Chapter 598 – A Puppet Appears. Reverie _ Peng! Peng! Although Small Saber King deflected the arrow, he was struck by Hunyo's small fist, and even with his impressive power, he still stumbled from the hit and hacked out a mouthful of blood. His entire body even began to shiver. How could the power of thunder be looked down upon? Damn it! The look in his eyes was fiendish. This mystical power was supposed to be his, and the stronger Hunyo's battle prowess was now, the more he was jealous, wishing to cut open Hunyo's brain immediately to extract the thunderclap ninth heaven. Very good, you guys have successfully enraged me. Small Saber King grasped his saber. Wong, the saber chi all over his body overflowed, with black-colored light intertwining. The presence of despair interwove in heaven and earth, making one have the urge to suicide. Ling Han felt a chill within. Small Saber King walked the path of saber of despair. A saber strike would seize one's mind, making one have thoughts of despair and even forgetting to ward off blows. Under the influence of this saber intent, Zhu Xian'er found it difficult to even control the ship. The golden ship kept swaying left and right, as if about to fall. Xian'er! Ling Han shouted loudly, like a wake-up call that provoked one's thoughts. Zhu Xian'er immediately returned to her senses. She also possessed the aptitude of a king amongst martial artists and began to walk on her own path. Even if she wasn't as freakish as Ling Han, she wouldn't be completely controlled by someone else's saber intent. She had just let her guard down. With Ling Han's shout, she immediately restored her senses. All of you die! Small Saber King brandished his sword, and a saber ray 300 meters long came sweeping, its might shocking. Hunyo moved agilely, and her small body swung, attacking Small Saber King again. Meanwhile, Ling Han took out another arrow and mounted it on the bow, drawing the bowstring but not releasing it. The unlaunched attack posed the greatest threat. Small Saber King had no choice but to put a large part of his focus on Ling Han. Ling Han's arrow was enough to pose a threat to him, and had to be guarded against. However, if Ling Han released the arrow, then he would strike it down in a single blow and fear it no more. Ling Han deliberately didn't fire it, making him on tenterhooks and distracted. Hunyo took the advantage of it to attack, and as she waved her small fists, lightning wove closely. Small Saber King snorted, shaking off Hunyo and charging towards Ling Han. This constant threat had to be eliminated first, or else he wouldn't be able to unleash 100% of his battle prowess at all. Peng! Peng! Hunyo's small fist struck Small Saber King's back, but only set off a chain of lightning. His defense had already been activated, and he could actually take Hunyo's attacks head-on without being harmed. Small Saber King charged with his sword, attacking towards Ling Han. Damn it! You dare to ignore Nyo. Hunyo was infuriated. Her small body turned into lightning again, and in a flash, she already appeared behind Small Saber King. Riding on his neck, she opened her mouth and bit towards him. Ah! Small Saber King screamed tragically. He clearly already spread his defense completely, and even a high-level spiritual infant tear wouldn't break through it. However, encountering Hunyo's teeth, it became a mere display. A streak of blood shot up. It was actually silver in color, showing this person's peculiarly. Damn it! Small Saber King swung his sword towards his back. Hunyo flashed again, turning into a flash of lightning to escape. Her battle instincts were too astounding. Small Saber King! Ling Han shouted fiercely and fired out another arrow. You really think I can't deal with you guys? Small Saber King let out a battle cry, and silver-colored rays of light set off from his entire body. His entire person also turned silver, as if turning into a statue. His battle prowess rose rapidly. Peng! He struck with his saber and directly crushed the arrow into pieces. Not good. Ling Han's expression changed drastically as he shouted, Hunyo, hurry on back. Small Saber King was at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and even 1 foot into the deity transformation tier. Now, it was unknown what mystical art was or bloodline was activated by him, but he directly crossed into deity transformation tier. It was no longer possible to face him. Hunyo was sharp, and in a flash, she already appeared on the golden ship. Go! Ling Han shouted loudly, and continued to draw the bow, firing towards Small Saber King. However, with 3 consecutive shots, he also felt exhausted and couldn't even stand firmly, his figure swaying. This arrow slowed Small Saber King slightly. After all, the combination of 2 mystical arts, annihilating Dragonstar Arrow and the Eye of Truth, with the usage of 7th tier rare metal, couldn't possibly be taken lightly. But for Small Saber King, who'd already crossed into deity transformation tier, this was also just a matter of waving his saber once. Zhu Xian hurriedly controlled the ship, sailing away swiftly. You think you can escape? Small Saber King sneered. Peng! A fist smashed down out of nowhere, and just happened to block the golden ship's trajectory. Peng! Terrifying power surged violently, and the spiritual infant tier level shield was actually instantly shattered. The entire ship was blown up right away. At this time, a strange human figure appeared in the sky. It was as if forged with transparent crystal. Light appeared to refract irregularly off its body, and one had to examine it closely to discover the existence of such a person. Earlier, he was always hidden in the sky, as if non-existent. Now, he suddenly launched an attack and blew up the golden ship with a single punch. Small Saber King arrived, but he was immediately astonished because although there were fragments fluttering in midair, there weren't any hints of the remains of Ling Han and the other 2. Instantly teleported away, he muttered. That peculiar person stood behind him. It was roughly the same height as him, yet it didn't seem to exist. If not for the refraction of light, it truly could disappear from the line of sight. A diamond puppet. It was the puppet of the highest level inside the ancient dynasty's treasure vault, possessing deity transformation tier battle prowess. The extraordinary nature of the materials it was made of allowed it to cloak and possess considerable intelligence. It was simply a natural assassin. Even if it was instant teleportation, they couldn't have escaped too far. Small Saber King muttered, under my art of remote sensing of heaven and earth, they'll soon be found. Mph, they obtained my mystical art, yet are still trying to run? He left treading on air. Meanwhile, the diamond puppet quietly disappeared in the sky. No one knew where it went. Ling Han obviously didn't use any instant teleportation talisman. He certainly had such a treasure, but didn't plan on using it here. In the instant that the golden ship was destroyed, he stored Hunyo and Zhu Xian inside the Black Tower. The Black Tower was like a microscopic seedling as it floated down from the sky and fell inside the river in a forest, traveling with the current. Ling Han soon exited the Black Tower, returned the way he came, and began searching inside the battle area earlier. Found it. Not long after, he found a silver drop of liquid on the ground. This was Small Saber King's blood. His bloodline had to be special, or he'd cultivated some art that actually turned his blood silver. This drop of blood was bitten out by Hunyuone of several drops spilled. However, some splattered into the water, diluted, and couldn't be found. Only this drop of blood landed on a leaf. A spiritual infant tier being's blood was extremely overbearing, emitting a terrifying presence. The life force of the plant below it was already extinguished, and Ling Han also felt an immense pressure when approaching. A drop of blood, still trying to overturn the skies? Ling Han spread open origin power to guard his body. Iron Sheet body allowed him to have enough qualifications to withstand such pressure. He stored this drop of blood inside the vial of curses. Let's see if I can't curse you to death. Chapter 599, The Curse Comes into Effect. Chapter 599, The Curse Comes into Effect. Reverie _ Ling Han had wanted to injure Small Saber King with the sunset bow and obtain his blood for the curse, but Small Saber King was certainly strong, deflecting all his attacks. It was rather Hunyo who'd succeeded. He extended a finger and pressed it on one of the vial of curses patterns, which was the death curse. However, Ling Han was taken by surprise as the pattern actually didn't light up. What's going on? Ling Han was startled, but soon thought of how some people's natal horoscopes were strong, and they hard to be cursed to death. For example, he was one, He was fine entering the ancient mineshaft, and had at least 10 days to half a month before he would be affected by the cursed chi. It looked like one drop of blood wouldn't be enough to curse Small Saber King to death. Ling Han settled for the next best thing, and said to himself, "Can't curse you to death, then I'll curse you to fall ill. Can't let you off that easily." He pressed on another pattern, and this time, the pattern lit up. This meant that the curse had come into effect, and the effect was illness. As for what illness, Ling Han didn't know. Ling Han proceeded on foot. He felt that he'd really suffered a great loss this time with the golden ship smashed and 3 arrows lost. In days to come, he definitely had to take down Small Saber King, who'd obtained almost the entire ancient dynasty's treasure vault, which would be enough to make up for his losses. But now, Ling Han decided to break through to the spiritual infant tier as soon as possible, or else he could only run when encountering Small Saber King. Moreover, if it weren't for his possession of the Black Tower, he might not even be able to escape. Under the great pressure, his fighting spirit also began to rise. However, after only walking for a short while, he suddenly felt a bad premonition, and raised his voice. "Since you've come, why hide?" Small Saber King's figure surfaced as he said coldly, "You think you can escape from my grasp? Truly too naive. Whether I'm naive or not is another matter, but it looks like you're about to have bad luck," Ling Han said with a smile. "Oh, what sort of bad luck?" Small Saber King said casually while closing in on Ling Han. He didn't dare to be careless, not having sensed Hunyo's presence all along. That little girl could turn into lightning and was extremely fast, and her teeth were darn sharp, being able to bite through even his defenses. Ling Han pondered, and said, "Just you wait." "Ha." Small Saber King sneered. He obviously assumed that Ling Han was trying to intimidate him with empty words, and continued to close in on Ling Han, emitting his saber intent to lock onto Ling Han. As long as Ling Han moved slightly, he would strike out with Heavenly Saber to kill Ling Han on the spot. The reason why he didn't unleash his saber was that he still wanted to know Hunyo's whereabouts. She had grasped the mystical power, Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, which he was determined to acquire. Gu. At this moment, his stomach suddenly growled. Small Saber King's complexion instantly turned weird. He actually had a stomachache. How was that possible? After advancing into the flower blossom tier, martial artists broke away from the temporal, and definitely couldn't get sick, let alone suffer from a stomachache. However, now, he truly felt his stomach hurting like hell, and something was surging on, almost rushing out. That made no sense. Starting from the flower blossom tier, even if martial artists ate, the beneficial things would be absorbed by the body while the impurities would be discharged through the skin. The entire person was without grime and contamination, and definitely didn't have the need to relieve oneself. Now, he simply wanted to empty his bowls, unleashing stuff to his heart's content. "Look, you've got bad luck as expected," Ling Han said with a smile. Small Saber King wanted to unleash his saber, but he farted loudly, and his face turned green. That urge became more and more intense. It was useless even if he clamped his legs tightly, unable to hold it back in at all. You wait." Small Saber King was a reputable person anyhow, and wouldn't possibly fight while spraying out shit. He hurriedly turned, twisting his butt to leave. He scuttled into a bush, and instantly, the grumble of his stomach was like thunder rolls, echoing pi li pa la, impossible to stop once it started. Respects. Ling Han said from afar. Small Saber King is impressive as expected. A maneuver of stench to assail enemies is simply unprecedented. Truly can't learn it even if one wanted to. Small Saber King wanted to retort, but his stomach was still rolling in waves, and he instantly let out a smothered groan, holding his breath and pushing it all out satisfyingly. "Take an arrow." Ling Han drew sunset bow, and the arrow already mounted on the string. "Ling Han, you have no shame." Small Saber King roared angrily. Without Hunyo restraining him, he actually didn't fear Ling Han's marksmanship, but with his current situation, was he going to swing his saber while spurting stuff out of the other end? Against a deranged person like you, what standards need to be held? Ling Han fired an arrow. He was also furious to the extreme. Small Saber King killed the people of 2 villages in cold blood, and Ling Han fired this arrow despite knowing that it would only cut Small Saber King an even sorrier figure, still deciding to waste it for once. Xiao, the arrow turned into a streak of white light, firing out like a flying dragon in the sky. Small Saber King had no choice but to swing his saber to ward it off. With his butt bare, that look was truly wretched to the extreme. Ling Han, if I don't kill you, I swear I won't be able to live. Pu. Before he finished his fierce words, he was forced to squat down again, defecating to his heart's content. Kill me. I'm the one that's going to kill you. Ling Han snorted, and no longer attacked, turning to leave. The opponent still had a diamond puppet, which was probably searching for him separately. It had already been a long while, and presumably, Small Saber King had already summoned the puppet through a mystic art. If he didn't leave now, he would have to hide in the Black Tower again. He used the demon fairy step, fluttering in the wind and moving further away. From afar, he still seemed to be able to hear that thunder-like sound of diarrhea. Spiritual infant tear was strong even in this aspect. After 3 days, Ling Han arrived at a city. The decorative pattern on the vial of curses had already dimmed. Small Saber King's drop of blood had been exhausted, and he could no longer be cursed. Ling Han found it a pity. If he could make Small Saber King die from diarrhea, it would actually vent his anger. He summoned both Zhu Xian and Hu Niu. The three walked on the streets, but soon they saw that people were pointing fingers at them. After a while, Ling Han discovered that portraits of him and Hu Niu were posted over the city. This was a bounty notice, which said if one discovered their whereabouts and provided the information, one would receive a large amount of rewards. However, the bounty only had him and Hu Niu's portraits, but not their names. Apparently, Small Saber King issued the bounty. Presumably, he still had some qualms, not daring to mention Ling Han's name after all. Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist. If one publicly set a bounty for one, wouldn't they have to fear the Alchemy Society's thunderous rage? He was currently only in the spiritual infant tier, and hadn't advanced into shattering void tier, which would let him to do whatever he wished. Ling Han hurriedly left with Hu Niu and Zhu Xian. As expected, Small Saber King chased over shortly. He, Hu Niu, and Zhu Xian entered the Black Tower, changed their appearance with disguise pill, and then appeared overtly again. Ling Han. Just as they were about to leave the city, Small Saber King charged over, aiming right for Ling Han and Hu Niu with a saber slash, like an immortal beyond the skies. How'd this guy discover them when they were disguised? Ling Han was astounded, hurriedly employing the demon fairy step to evade, while Hu Niu turned into a flash of lightning, charging towards Small Saber King. You want to use the same old moves in front of me twice? Small Saber King sneered. Chapter 600, Struck Mistakenly. Chapter 600, Struck Mistakenly. Reverie _ The bracelet on Small Saber King's wrist suddenly lit up and fired a light beam towards Hu Niu, confining her. Rushing, the little girl opened her mouth and bit down repeatedly, severing the light beam and obtaining freedom again. Xiao, Ling Han fired an arrow, but didn't use the sunset bow. Instead, he directly used his body as a bow and origin power as the arrow because there wasn't enough time for him to take out the sunset bow. Small Saber King, however, didn't dare to be careless. His figure flashed, dodging Ling Han's attack, but missing the best chance to attack Hu Niu. The arrow of origin power brushed past his body. Small Saber King then realized that this arrow's power was far from comparable to the one earlier, and revealed a furious look out of shame. The dignified Small Saber King, the strongest prodigy in the middle state, was actually tricked by Ling Han, frightened by his not-so-strong skill, missing the best chance to take down the little girl. This little girl's body hid the secrets of the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, which he was determined to obtain. Hu Niu, come back! Ling Han shouted. He didn't want the little girl to take any more risks. Hu Niu promptly nodded, and jumped back in a flash, making a wry face at Small Saber King, and saying, "Stinky." Small Saber King assumed that Hu Niu was mocking the shameful incident a few days ago when he shat his brains out. This seemed to him a great humiliation, and a scar that couldn't be revealed, so when he was mocked openly by Hu Niu, killing intent instantly filled the air. Go. Under watchful eyes, Ling Han didn't want to use the Black Tower. He grabbed Hu Niu with the left hand and Zhu Xian with the right hand, using the demon fairy step and taking to his heels at once. However, after taking only 2 steps, he instantly felt a bad premonition, hurriedly shifting his feet and flying towards the side. Peng! A heavy punch landed on the streets and instantly set off a wave of dust. If Ling Han didn't change the direction in which he advanced, he would definitely be directly smashed by the fist. The diamond puppet's figure appeared, its transparent body refracted rays of light, appearing extremely peculiar. The wave of dust swirled by, and a large pit at over 10 meters deep appeared in the streets, extremely frightening. Ling Han and the girls spurted out blood. Although they evaded the attack in time, they were still affected. The power of the deity transformation tier was terrifying, making the 3 sustain injuries simply from being scraped. "Where do you think you're running off to?" Small Saber King said coldly, striking out with his saber. Blood instantly splattered on the streets as the passers-by all suffered for it, reduced to fragments the moment the saber ray touched them. This person completely treated life with indifference, being reckless and unbridled, viewing all living beings as nonentities. Sure, he struck with his saber again. Ling Han was bursting with anger, his gaze ice cold as he instantly threw out a human body. It was precisely Feng Wei-Chi. Sure, the saber light swept by. Feng Wei-Chi suddenly appeared from within the Black Tower, and without figuring out the situation, he suddenly saw a flash of saber light strike him, something he'd never anticipated. However, this saber light seemed so familiar, that modulation and that sword intent was something he'd seen many times. It was his son. Why was his son attacking him? Could he not be his blood-related son? When he was younger and left home to toughen himself, could he have been cuckolded? He let out a sharp and tragic scream, and was sliced into 2 halves by this saber light. Small Saber King was startled. He'd never anticipated that Ling Han could actually throw out a living person from thin air. He stared blankly at Feng Wei-Chi's corpse, and couldn't help but stagger several times. This was his blood-related father, who he'd thought was confined somewhere by Ling Han, but who knew that Ling Han could throw him out of thin air, something he never would have foreseen. "Father!" he cried out in alarm, his face pale as he almost fainted. He could see the lives of everyone in the world as nonentities, but Feng Wei-Chi was his blood-related father and the only next of kin. It made him instantly feel as if a knife pierced through his heart. For a moment, he had no thoughts at all. Ling Han took it all in, and said coldly, "Now, do you still dare to say that all people are nobodies?" Ling Han. Small Saber King said word by word, flames bursting out of his eyes. He only had one thought now, and that was to tear Ling Han to shreds to vent his anger. Ling Han shrugged, and said, "Don't look at me with those eyes. Before denouncing others, look at the things you've done. Besides, you personally killed your old man. TSK, 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 considering the character of you two, father and son, this also counts as punishing one's own relative in the cause of justice." "You shut up." Small Saber King darted out. He was going to cut down Ling Han. Ling Han treaded with the demon fairy step and kept retreating. Hong, on the other side, the diamond puppet also charged over. With the presence of the deity transformation tier spread ostentatiously, it was more frightening than Small Saber King. "Temph, who dares to stir up trouble in my 9-cloud city?" At this moment, a powerful presence surged out, following the appearance of a sturdy man roughly in the 50s. However, when he saw that diamond puppet, he instantly turned pale with fear and turned to run at once. What a joke! He was only in the spiritual infant tier, so how could he rival a deity transformation tier being? In the middle state, although spiritual infant tier elites weren't the top-notch elites, they could still be called experts. Thus, this person ran over ostentatiously, but actually discovered a deity transformation tier troublemaker, frightening him out of his wits. Ling Han had no intention of getting entangled here. Of the 2 opponents, one was at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and another in the deity transformation tier, so he couldn't possibly rival them. He took out the instant teleportation talisman Ma Duo Bao gave him with a smile, and said, "Brother's done playing with you guys, off we go." He pretended to stick the instant teleportation talisman on his body but brought Xu Xian and Hu Niu into the Black Tower. If his expression was convincing enough, Small Saber King obviously would assume that he'd used an instant teleportation talisman run away with the two girls. How does he have so many instant teleportation talismans? Small Saber King frowned. Instant teleportation talismans were extremely valuable, and being able to obtain one was equivalent to having one more safeguard on life, but Ling Han actually possessed two, something truly unimaginable. Could this have been obtained in the 12 palaces? He muttered. His gaze turned towards Feng Wei-Chi's corpse again. His killing intent churned as he clenched his fists tightly. As a son, he definitely had to exact vengeance. Ling Han, I'll definitely capture you and tear you into pieces, he said in a low voice, his expression as fierce as if a wounded beast's. After Small Saber King left with the puppet, Ling Han exited the Black Tower. He stroked his chin, and said, with someone's shadow constantly following, I can't always wave around the instant teleportation talisman to deceive him. I have to master the thunderclap 9th heaven as soon as possible. At that time, my body will be like the lightning. Combined with the demon fairy step, I'll be able to compare with him in speed. I'll wait for the appearance of the divine thunder here. The new year had passed, and spring had come. Once the spring season began, sudden claps of thunder would gradually occur more often. However, Ling Han's luck truly wasn't that great. Waiting in the city for 7 days, every day was a sunny and cloudless day. The weather was finer than ever. Just as Ling Han thought of leaving, the weather suddenly changed. The thunder rolled, and the first flash of lightning came inadvertently. Chapter 601, Guiding the Thunder into the Body. Chapter 601, Guiding the Thunder into the Body. Reverie _ Damn, the heavens also like to surprise people. Ling Han said, and immediately leapt out. Flying outside the city, he immediately activated the mystical art thunderclap 9th heaven, and his body and the thunder clouds in the sky acquired some sort of special connection. Quang. The first flash of lightning struck down exactly towards Ling Han, as if intentionally aiming at him. Z. The power of lightning entered his body, and Ling Han was instantly shocked, being burnt on the outside and tender on the inside. This was the terrifying power of heaven and earth, which could instantly burn Ling Han into a piece of coke. Despite almost fainting immediately, he gritted his teeth and bore the pain. If he were to faint now, then the pain he'd suffered just now would be in vain. He hurriedly operated the thunderclap 9th heaven, and guided the power of lightning around his body, transforming it with the mystic art. Quang, another flash of lightning descended. Ling Han became the center of the lightning, and with the activation of the thunderclap 9th heaven, each lightning received a mysterious pull, being attracted to him. Fuck, I haven't even entered the heaven tier, yet I'm being struck by lightning, Ling Han said, gritting his teeth. Being struck by lightning didn't feel good at all. Fortunately, this was also a normal lightning. The divine might was much greater when facing a tribulation. Indestructible Heaven's Scroll was also activated, repairing the damage he endured. This was an advantage that other people completely couldn't compare to. He made sure not to lose consciousness, and activated the mystic art thunderclap 9th heaven to change his body. The power of lightning coursed through the veins and flesh in his body, allocated by the mystic art, changing Ling Han's constitution. This was actually quite dangerous. If he didn't endure it, he might be struck unconscious by the lightning, and in such condition, a normal flower blossom tier warrior would definitely thoroughly die in a few more strikes. Even if he didn't die, the power of lightning would run amok within the body, which could cause immense destruction to it. To say the least, even if there was no destruction at all, the attempt at guiding the power of lighting to change his own body would be an utter failure. Ling Han forcibly endured the pain of the electric shock, which truly made him want to fall unconscious so that he didn't have to endure it anymore. But, in order to become stronger, he gritted his teeth and continued to activate the mystic art, attracting more power of lightning to strike his way and enter his body. Z. His entire person turned into a ball of white light. Hu Niu and Zhu Xian'er watched from afar. Zhu Xian'er's expression was full of worry, while Hu Niu paid it no mind, and said, "Don't worry, Niu's Ling Han will definitely tough it out." Zhu Xian'er carried Hu Niu, nodding, but she was still extremely worried. After all, being overly concerned caused disorder, and she wasn't crude and careless like Hu Niu. No matter what, Hunyo was still a little girl. Lightning wasn't rare, but it was rare when all of it descended towards a single direction. Soon, there were people that came over to have a look. Most of them were low-level martial artists, merely at the spiritual pedestal or the spiritual ocean tier. It was useless even if they discovered something, as they didn't dare to approach Ling Han, who could resist against such power of heaven and earth. Hunyo began to chase away people, and waved her small fists, sending people flying one after another. "What are you guys trying to do to Nyo's Ling Han?" She looked like she was protecting her child. She was too valiant, and even spiritual infant tier elites found it difficult to suppress her, let alone these people who instantly scattered like birds and wild animals. But not long after, elites also began to appear. The thunderbolts are falling concentratedly on the same place, so could it be a precious treasure is about to show itself to the world? This was what these people thought. Shio, 7 flower blossom tier warriors came. The older one looked to be over 70, and the younger ones over 40. After all, even the middle state couldn't be full of prodigies, having flower blossom tier elites in their 20s at every turn. At this time, over 10 thunderbolts had already fallen. Ling Han's entire body was covered by lightning, which was so terrifying and closely woven that no one's eyesight or divine sense could penetrate it. Thus, everyone could only see a field of lightning, but didn't know what was inside. It's definitely a precious treasure that's come into the world, only then would it attract the simultaneous lightning bombardment. Wait till the lightning disperses, we'll immediately begin seizing the treasure. The 7 people's gazes were burning. This was a small city, and nothing happened there ordinarily, but today, thunderbolts fell closely and intertwined into a sea of lightning, meaning that a treasure was coming into the world. Naturally, this made them excited, for perhaps this was a turning point in their life. From now on, they would be on the path of great success. However, this lightning seemed to be endless, continuing to strike without end. After one day, another 10 flower blossom tier warriors appeared. The 7 flower blossom tier ones of 9 Clouds City instantly acted as if facing a formidable enemy. What are the people of Great Universe City doing here? Haha, a mysterious treasure has come into the world, and you guys of 9 Cloud City want to have it all to yourselves? The flower blossom tier cultivators of Great Universe City snorted. "PH, it came into being in our 9 Cloud City, so it naturally belongs to 9 Cloud City." The flower blossom tier elites of 9 Cloud City engaged in a dispute. There's no such thing as ownership when it comes to worldly treasures, is there? Besides, isn't this outside of 9 Cloud City? PH, a few flower blossom tier warriors dare to be unbridled in my 9 Cloud City. That spiritual infant tier elite of 9 Cloud City appeared. A few days ago, he was scared witless by a diamond puppet, but now, he appeared to have the bearing of an elite. Once a spiritual infant tier warrior appeared, Great Universe City's flower blossom tier ones immediately shut up. It was useless even if there were 10 of them. Before a spiritual infant tier, the gap in tiers wasn't something that could be filled by a few dozen people. "Hehe, Lord Ma, how greatly imposing." A voice suddenly resounded as a slender middle-aged man walked out, with terrifying brilliance flickering around him. Zhong Wu Yun. 9 Cloud City's spiritual infant tier's eyes tensed up. The other person was also in the spiritual infant tier. Worldly treasures, those who see it were destined. Zhong Wu Yun smiled slightly. "Ma Zai Fang, if you want the treasure, then we'll see who has the skill. Then let's battle." Ma Zai Fang rushed toward the other party, and the flower blossom tier warriors of 9 Cloud City also attacked their flower blossom tier counterparts of Great Universe City. The treasure had to be kept for 9 Cloud City. Peng, 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 they instantly got into a fierce fight. Zhu Xian'er watched with astonishment, and felt it more laughable on the inside, thinking what expressions would they have when they discovered that within the lightning wasn't some treasure, but just Ling Han. Hunyo, on the other hand, burst with fury again. She was afraid that these people would be in Ling Han's way. Fortunately, the fight didn't reach Ling Han's side in the end, or else the little girl would definitely intervene. Ling Han was already gradually entering an optimal stage. The power of lightning circulated in his body, his entire person also seemed to turn into lightning, becoming dazzling white lightning, even the essence of life underwent a change. The intense pain from earlier had already disappeared, and now he became more and more relaxed, even somewhat enjoying the bombardment of lightning as if it were giving him a massage. Attracting thunderbolts into one's body to transform oneself. It succeeded. Ling Han smiled slightly, and stopped guiding the mystic art. The lightning that filled the sky also dispersed at last. This shouldn't have continued for this long, but being affected by the mystic art thunderclap ninth heaven, which produced a mutual interaction, made it last till now. He looked into his body, trying to find specific changes, but when his divine sense swept by his dantian, he couldn't help but reveal a shocked look. Chapter 602, 6 Elements. Chapter 602, 6 Elements. Reverie _ Ling Han had the 5 elements Chaos Lotus, which possessed 5 elements, reaching the perfect balance. Thus, he could absorb 5 different spirit chi at the same time, and wouldn't create chaos because any type of spirit chi was too strong. However, the 5 lotus petals were still there, but the lotus stem actually turned into lightning. His spirit base had one more element, lightning. Moreover, this didn't affect the balance of 5-element spirit base, but on top of its basis, allowed him to possess the lightning element. Ling Han was astounded. Spirit base could be transformed postnatally. In the previous life, he entered many historic sites, and acquired many high-level arts and skills, but not even one mystical power. However, in this lifetime, his luck was nature-defying, and he'd already acquired 3 of them. Mystical powers could change a person's constitution and spirit base. Ling Han was astounded. This shattered his understanding. Based on this development, didn't it mean that people could form 5-element spirit base and 6-element spirit base artificially? One only had to cultivate different mystical powers. Then, his 6-element spirit base was actually not that impressive, because it could be transformed into one postnatally, and maybe one didn't even need to cultivate mystical powers for it, as powerful beings could change it with their hands. What was called remaking and defying nature to change one's fate? This was it. Ling Han nodded inwardly, no longer proud at all of his own spirit base. There might be many more prodigies in the future that also possessed 6-element spirit base like he did. However, the 6-element spirit base was already at the pinnacle, and he wasn't any bit inferior to anyone else. With a thought, lightning immediately flickered on his body as if he turned into a thunderbolt. Regarding the thunderclap ninth heaven, he crossed through the preliminary threshold at last. The sky-filling lightning dissipated, and as Ling Han's figure appeared, the 2 parties that were battling fiercely stopped and looked towards him. Where's the precious treasure? It must have been seized by him. Instantly, the elites of the 2 cities all stared at Ling Han, their gazes chilly, as if they were going to eat him. Hey, why are you guys looking at me like that? Those gazes are making me uncomfortable, Ling Han said, smiling. Boy, hand over the treasure. These people already charged over. Earlier, they wanted to fight off the other party so that they could leave the treasure for their own side, but now, they had a common enemy. Just in time, then. I'll test this mystical power on you guys. Ling Han laughed loudly. Light flickered on his body as if a flash of lightning, his speed ridiculously fast. Peng. He released a punch bursting with lightning, and peng, 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 nearly 20 flower blossom tier warriors were knocked down by this single punch, leaving only 2 spiritual infant tier elites who were still chasing him. This also made the 2 spiritual infant tiers extremely shocked. This boy was so strong, and the power of that single punch was no lower than a spiritual infant tier elites. Ling Han revealed a smile. The thunderclap ninth heaven proved itself to be the mystical power of an ancient dynasty. It was powerful. His battle prowess now should have surpassed 20 stars, advancing onto the level of the spiritual infant tier. Boy, hand over the treasure, and we can spare your life, the 2 spiritual infant tier elites shouted at the same time. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, spare my life. As if you guys are that formidable. Come, 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 I'll play with you guys. Let's see who's more formidable. A mere junior at the flower blossom tier dares to be so impudent. Zhong Wu Yun and Ma Zai Fang both snorted, and made a grabbing motion at Ling Han. This sudden thunderbolt bombardment lasted for an entire day, and the treasure that came into the world was definitely out of the ordinary. The two had been stuck at this tier for a long time, dreaming of breaking through, and this mystical treasure might decide whether they could break through. Nyo will help you. Hu Nyo, seeing the battle, couldn't help but itch to have a go. Linghan laughed loudly, and said, "No need, no need. I can handle just these two people." He punched out, and 22 dragon elephants surfaced, woven closely with lightning, making them fiercer. Such a freakish boy, Zhong Wuyun and Ma Zai-fang both cried out. Their opponent actually cultivated 22 flashes of Chao, truly terrifying. There's something more impressive. Ling Han laughed loudly, then adhered the bone pattern, activated the Eye of Truth, and began bombarding the two spiritual infant tier opponents. His battle prowess was originally approaching 20 stars, and now that he grasped the thunderclap ninth heaven, he overcame this limit all of a sudden, finally possessing spiritual infant tier battle prowess. After he activated the Eye of Truth, even if Zhong Wuyun and Ma Zai-fang were both 7th level spiritual infant tier, they had no power to fight back, continuously being bombarded by him. Mystical power. Why was it called mystical power? Annihilating Dragonstar Arrow, in addition to the Eye of Truth, let him exterminate a spiritual infant tier elite with a single arrow. The Thunderclap ninth heaven, in addition to the Eye of Truth, might not have the surprise aspect of marksmanship, but its power was no inferior, just no longer having the effect dealing a fatal blow. The two spiritual infant tier warriors were forced to retreat repeatedly, their expressions full of disbelief. This was truly unimaginable. They were not only at the spiritual infant tier, but also its 7th layer, which meant its high level, yet they were still overwhelmed to the point of having no room to counterattack. Ling Han let out repeated battle cries, and his fists waved even fiercer. 22 dragon elephants fused into one and turned a light golden dragon elephant, bursting with lightning all over its body. There was also an ancient symbol that surfaced that seemed completely out of this world, and more like it came from a demonic realm. This dragon elephant was too frightening, and under its heavy stampede, the two great spiritual infant tier elites could only retreat. Condensing chi to form a ray. Zhong Wuyun and Ma Zai-fang cried out. They didn't realize that this was a pseudo-ray, and thought that Ling Han had already advanced into the 2nd level of the Way of the Fist. This step was truly too difficult to cross, and even though their cultivation was higher, they still only achieved 9 flashes of chi till now. Without 10 flashes, how could they qualify to form a ray? Seeing this made them extremely envious. Their opponent was only in the flower blossom tier, and was only in his 20s, yet he'd already cultivated over 20 flashes of chi and even formed a ray, making them erupt with envy. The more they fought, the more flustered they were, and their fighting spirit dispersed at last as they turned to run in separate directions. What valuable treasure, they didn't want it anymore. Ling Han didn't chase, either. He didn't have any grievances with these two people that couldn't be resolved. Fighting with them was only to test the power of the Thunderclap ninth heaven, and the result made him quite pleased. His speed now increased drastically by 3-fold, and his battle prowess increased by over 5 stars. He was also extremely shocked by this. If Small Saber King were to acquire this mystical power, he'd probably be invincible amongst the spiritual infant tier elites, and even able to sweep deity transformation tier opponent. A genius like that, with a foot already into the deity transformation tier, there was no need to doubt at all that he'd definitely possess battle prowess of the deity transformation tier. However, the ancient dynasty had a total of 4 mystical powers, and this Thunderclap ninth heaven was not the strongest. It was truly hard to imagine what an incredible mystical power the 9 Deaths Heaven Art would be. If I encountered Small Saber King now, I probably still wouldn't rival him, but running shouldn't be a problem, Ling Han said to himself. Despite his speed only increasing by 3-fold, if combined with the Demon Fairy Step, even a deity transformation tier elite would find it hard to catch up to him. Chapter 603, Encountering Old Friends. Chapter 603, Encountering Old Friends. Reverie _ Every time martial artists increase in lever, their power was amplified drastically by 10-fold to 100-fold. However, as for speed, being able to increase it by 1-fold was already good. Thus, Ling Han cultivated a body of lightning, and increased his speed explosively by 3-fold. With the addition of the Fairy Demon Step, His speed already surpassed the spiritual infant tier, crossing into the heights of the deity transformation tier. However, running isn't a solution, after all. I still have to break through to the spiritual infant tier as soon as possible. This way, I'll truly qualify to stand against small Saber King. Sigh, the martial arts level in this life is truly too high. If it were the previous life, with my strength now, only Sword Emperor and the like would qualify to compete with me at the same age, and nothing less than monsters 100 years of age would be able to suppress me. Now, it's great. The prodigies under 100 years of age are like bamboo shoots after the rain, emerging without end. Hee, but only this can give me enough motivation. I just cultivated the body of lightning, and can't truly turn my body into lightning yet, but it's not far from that step. At that time, my battle prowess will become even more powerful. Ling Han walked to Hu Niu and Zhu Xian'er, then revealed a smile, and said, "Let's go. We should go to Thousand Flower Prefecture to see the present-age prodigies." "Let's go." Hu Niu jumped in joy. Staying here for several days, she was very bored. Unfortunately, their golden ship was busted by the diamond puppet, and they had no means of transportation now, they could only walk on foot. They were too lazy to find another carriage, and just walked. To lessen the troubles, they all disguised themselves. Ling Han originally thought of disguising the three of them as husband and wife with a cute daughter, but Hu Niu was unwilling to no matter what. Consequently, they could only disguise as three siblings. Ling Han became a few years older, Zhu Xian'er covered her exceptionally beautiful face, while Hu Niu turned into a small clown. Ling Han specially activated an old art that usually didn't have much use to let the presence he emitted become a lot weaker, decreasing to the spiritual ocean tier. This way, if Small Saber King could still find him, then Small Saber King was truly capable. They left Nine Cloud City and headed towards Thousand Flower Prefecture. Ling Han wasn't in a rush. The opening of the Restore Heaven Academy was only news, and the true entrance exam was still a long way off. At least, the news that he heard at Nine Cloud City was that the period of the exam wasn't decided yet. There was at least half a year's time no matter how one thought about it. Otherwise, with the massiveness of the vast lands, many people wouldn't make it in time. They strolled onwards. This was also cultivation anyway. Chem. Ling Han paused slightly and looked back, seeing dust flutter away as a party rapidly approached. He first thought that Small Saber King had caught up again, but immediately discovered that it wasn't the case. These people were only Flower Blossom tier warriors. There was a total of 7 people, moving swiftly and soon catching up to the 3 of them, then continuing to advance onwards without pausing. Ling Han's gaze swept by, and he couldn't help but reveal a surprised look, and said, "Can ye?" Within the party, someone immediately stopped in their steps, and turned around. His figure slim and his entire body emitting a piercingly cold saber chi, he was as if a sharp unsheathed saber. He looked surprised at Ling Han with doubt in his gaze. It was Can Yi. In the long time since they'd seen each other, he actually broke through to the Flower Blossom tier and walked down his own path, becoming extremely confident. "I am Ling Yun," Ling Han said with a smile. Hearing this name, Can Yi immediately understood that this was Ling Han, and instantly revealed a joyful expression. "Can Yi, what's the matter?" a girl in red clothing asked. She was extremely beautiful, her beautiful hair was like the clouds, and her skin was smooth like jade. Under the sunlight, it actually had a luster, as if she were a goddess. Can Yi didn't speak. Ling Han approached with a laugh, and said, running into an old friend in a distant land. "I'm Ling Yun, Can Yi's fellow townsman." "Oh." The girl in red and the others all nodded, so it was just a fellow townsman. These 6 people were all remarkable people, with striking appearance and the feel of soaring confidence, apparently all coming from prestigious families. They saw that Ling Han was only at the spiritual infant tier, so they obviously wouldn't take another look at him. If it weren't for Can Yi, who wouldn't move, they definitely would have turned to leave. A person like Ling Han wasn't at all in the same world as them. "Young Master Ling." Can Yi was extremely stirred up. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "With you calling me Young Master Ling, should I not also call you Young Master Yi? Don't be so cheeky." Can Yi came to realize that Ling Han concealed his identity, and simply laughed, no longer persisting in calling Ling Han Young Master. The girl in red clothing and the others were somewhat indignant. How could a mere spiritual infant tier qualify to rank amongst them? After calling you young master, you actually acted smug and affected. Just where that confidence came from. Can ye, we should set out quickly. I already received reliable news that the Restore Heaven Academy will formally open in half a year. Going there earlier, we might be able to know the contents of the exam and prepare for it, someone urged. Oh, it's going to be half a year before Restore Heaven Academy opens? Ling Han interjected. He might as well take advantage of this gap in time to search for the whereabouts of Boundless Mountain. What does it have to do with you? A pretty boy looked impatiently at Ling Han, revealing a look of contempt. Could this brat also be thinking of going to the Restore Heaven Academy? What a real joke. A man already in his 20s and only at the spiritual infant tier. If this could get in Restore Heaven Academy, wouldn't it be a joke? They were recruiting the elites of the world, the prodigies of prodigies, and only people like them were qualified to enter. Cho Fei, what are you suggesting? Kan Yi looked balefully at that pretty boy, unhesitatingly unleashing his long saber and pointing it at that person. Kan Yi, for this good-for-nothing, you would actually draw your sword at this young master? That pretty boy called Cho Fei looked full of astonishment. He completely didn't expect Kan Yi would suddenly turn hostile towards him for a mere spiritual infant tier. Apologize, Kan Yi said coldly, his gaze like a saber, bearing a murderous aura. In his eyes, Ling Han was a benefactor and an idol he worshipped, yet Cho Fei dared to show contempt for Ling Han. It obviously made his killing intent burn. Kan Yi, seeing that your talent isn't bad, I associated with you, but don't think that you really have the right to sit as equals with this young master. Whatever. Everyone's friends, no need to make it unpleasant. A man came forward with a smile to ease the situation, and said, since you guys are going to Restore Heaven Academy, then let's go together. Cho Fei wanted to oppose at on Sito travel with a nobody. However, before he spoke any word of objection, a man stopped him, and said in a low voice near his ear, won't messing with this brat will be quite interesting? Hearing this, his thoughts to object came to an end, and he simply looked coldly at Ling Han before he left dejectedly, thinking that he would definitely make it unbearable for this guy in the following days. Although Kan Yi didn't want to drop the matter, seeing Ling Han shake his head, he sheathed his long saber. The situation eased up at last. Chapter 604, Disputes. Chapter 604, Disputes. Reverie _ Everyone introduced themselves except for Kan Yi and Cho Fei. The other four young men were called Center Jian Sen, Yu Yuan Ming, Zhu Kaiji, Fan Wen Lin, respectively, while the only girl, the one in red clothing, was called Helan Yun. The majority of martial artists were men. Women were the minority to begin with, and even less could cultivate to the flower blossom tier. Since He Yun Lan was a splendid beauty, she was someone even harder to come by. Thus, Cho Fei and the others all circled around He Yun Lan. However, He Yun Lan seemed to have a favorable impression of Kan Yi, and didn't pay attention to the ingratiation of the other people. Cho Fei and the other four felt it extremely unfortunate. They also felt unfortunate for Zhu Xian'er, because from the looks of her figure, she was absolutely perfect, without any flaws. However, when moving their gaze onto her face, anyone would say that heaven was unfair. Since she was given such a perfect physique, why was she born with such an average face? Zhu Xian'er won the title of #1 beauty in the North region just from her figure and revealing a bit of her chin. Her figure was too perfect, and a covered face gave people unlimited imagination. But now, her figure was still perfect, but her face was no longer obscured, obviously not leaving any room for imagination. This countenance was too ordinary. The 10 people set out again, and when talking about the Restore Heaven Academy, Cho Fei and the others all appeared to be full of confidence, thinking they could definitely enter, and were without a shred of worry. Cho Fei obviously took to blows at Ling Han from time to time, and said that Restore Heaven Academy's admittance exam was definitely as difficult as climbing the skies and that even spiritual pedestal tier elites might not qualify to enter, wanting to make a fool of Ling Han. Ling Han wouldn't possibly care about it. When it was time for the exam, he would reveal his strength, and this guy would obviously piss his pants in fright. The more Cho Fei boasted now, the harder he would fall in the future. They traveled by day and slept at night. They all had spatial rings, and at night, they would take out tents and pitch them to cultivate and rest. On the second day, they hastened on their journey again. People shouldn't forget to cultivate even when outside. Only by maintaining optimal condition could they deal with sudden accidents. After all, the world of martial arts was extremely brutal, and encountering slaughter for no reason was a run-of-the-mill occurrence. As expected, after traveling for 3 days, they encountered an accident. Ding, 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 ding. The sounds of a fierce battle were heard in the distance before them, and soon, a few people approached rapidly. On one side was a beauty a little over 20, wearing a crimson-red silk dress and holding a long sword in hand. Her opponents were 4 scantily clad women with heavy makeup. Whether it was attacking or leaping, the 2 large white rabbits on their chests seemed to bounce out like surging waves. Comparably, the girl in silk dress was not only young, but also 10 times more beautiful, with long slit eyes like water and extremely touching. These 5 women were all in the flower blossom tier, and by the looks of the situation, the silk-dressed girl was a notch higher in tier. However, she wasn't keen on fighting, and after she fought her way out of the encirclement, she immediately leapt away. It was rather the 4 beautiful women that were at her heels. This was baffling to people. Why did she keep running despite having the advantage? After the 4 beautiful women chased her for a while, one of them threw out a ribbon at extremely fast speed, instantly catching up to the silk-dressed girl and fastening onto her small waist. With a Z, her figure instantly halted. The other 3 beautiful women took advantage of it to charge over, and caught up to the silk-dressed girl, recommencing the fierce battle. The silk-dressed girl struggled free from the constraint with great difficulty, yet fell into an encirclement again. She could only continue fighting to break through the siege. So beautiful. Beautiful as a fairy. She is my type. No one's allowed to contest with me. Get lost. I've also taken a fancy to her. Chozy Fei and the other 4 all had their eyes lit up brightly. This silk-dressed beauty was certainly extremely beautiful, a whole lot more than He Lan Yun. The other 4 women were not bad, but they were older after all, and since advancing into the flower blossom tier slowed down aging, maybe their age was enough to be grandmothers. The 5 people wanted to intervene to play out a hero rescues the beauty scenario, naturally giving them the excuse to strike up a conversation. Qin Yi Yu, how could you possibly run from this young master's grasp? A voice came from afar, and soon, a luxurious carriage could be seen approaching quickly, drawn by 2 jasper lions. These were ancient relic species. Though they were high tier, their bloodline was rare, and they were very seldomly seen. The carriage was extremely luxurious, reaching 15 meters in length and 10 meters in height, looking like a moving palace. The materials used were extremely exquisite purple pear wood and jade dragon gold, which were extremely precious and treasured materials, but looking at the designs on the carriage, it made people unceasingly disgusted. They were all extremely vivid and lifelike designs of men and women making love. Just by looking at it, people could imagine the movements and the decadent sounds. Wind. Wind Moon Sek. Center Jian Sen was first to cry out, his gaze fixed on the flag planted on the carriage, and voice somewhat quivering. What? Chozy Fei and the others all cried out immediately. The Wind Moon sect was a superforce in the middle state. It wasn't as powerful as the 5 great ancient sects, but it also had heaven-tier elites, and was far from what their backgrounds could compare to. Instantly, their thoughts of hero rescuing the beauty immediately dimmed. Everyone, I am Dark Glory Valley's Qin Yi Yu, please lend me a hand. At this time, the silk-dressed girl asked for everyone's help. Dark Glory Valley. Everyone was startled within again. That was also a great force, though much inferior to Wind Moon sect. Qin Yi Yu, why involve others? I am Wind Moon sect's sect master's son, and your Dark Glory Valley's master's junior disciple. We're practically a match made in heaven. Hurry and surrender to this young master. This young master will take you into the world of paradise to enjoy the most joyous things between men and women. Hu Qing Fang, don't kid yourself. Even if I die, I won't submit to your wishes. Qin Yi Yu tangled persistently with the 4 beautiful women while reprimanding, and killing intent was all over her delicate face. It's over. This beauty's done for. Yun Yuan Ming said, covering his head, appearing to feel extreme pity. It's rumored that Wind Moon Sect's disciples are all lecherous, viewing the thing between men and women as cultivation. Wind Moon Sect's sect master is all the more lustful. It's rumored that he has several hundred wives alone, and the beauties that he's defiled reach several tens of thousand. Qin Yi Yu being fancied by Wind Moon Sect's sect master's son, it'll definitely be hard to get away. It can't be helped, we can't interfere at all. Even if we wanted to interfere, our strength is not enough. Cho Zifei and the others found excuses for themselves. They all just entered the flower blossom tier, whether it was Qin Yi Yu or the four beautiful women, they were all at least mid-level flower blossom tier. There certainly was somewhat of a gap in tier. However, for geniuses, this bit difference in tier was actually not much. Wasn't it quite normal to battle surpassing 5 stars? They simply didn't dare to provoke the Wind Moon Sect. Linghan laughed, and said, "Can Yi help?" "Okay." Can Yi said no more, and charged right up, brandishing his saber. Chapter 605, Struck Back. Chapter 605, Struck Back. Reverie _ Can Yi attacked decisively, and with a swing of the saber, 9 flashes of saber chi dispersed, the saber intent chilling. He was as if a god of war. His progress was fast as expected, reaching 9 flashes of saber chi, and only a step away from condensing a ray. Martial arts were not just about tiers. In the first layer of the flower blossom tier, some only had 1-star battle prowess, yet some could reach 5 stars, or even 10 stars. Can Yi was only at the first layer of the flower blossom tier, but his battle prowess reached 7 stars. This aspect was his personal talent, and the effect of heavenly luckstone, allowing him to obtain additional 5 stars battle prowess. As 9 flashes of saber chi moved unhindered, Can Yi immediately tore open the 4 beautiful women's encirclement and joined hands with Qin Yi Yu. Brandishing saber and sword together, they instantly suppressed the 4 beautiful women. Originally, Qin Yi Yu already had a slight advantage, let alone now that there was Can Yi whose strength was not much inferior to hers. Inside the carriage, Hu Qingfang's extremely discontented snort could be heard. He said, "The brat with the severed arm, you dare ruin this young master's fine occasion?" Can Yi was not one to speak much to begin with, he simply swung the saber, completely defeating the 4 beautiful women. Seeing such battle prowess, Cho Zifei and the others turned pale. They knew that Can Yi was strong, which was why they admitted him into their circle, but everyone was still quite conceited, thinking they themselves definitely weren't inferior to him. Comparing it now, they were obviously shocked. "Thank you," Qin Yi Yu said. Amidst the battle, she couldn't pay attention to courtesy, and simply nodded at Can Yi. Can Yi was expressionless, extremely cold and detached. Linghan sighed. "How can you pick up girls like that?" She was showing her gratitude towards you, and if you were a bit gentler towards her, maybe you'd fall for each other. Wasn't someone like him bound to be alone? Courting death. A man, who looked little over 20, darted out of the carriage. He was in embroidered clothes ornamented by jade and looked quite handsome, but the perverseness on his face was too strong. Those eyes couldn't wish more to strip down all of the clothing on women. He was obviously Hu Qingfang. "Cripple, you dare ruin this young master's fine matter? You truly are tired of living. See how this young master will put you down." Can Yi brandished his long saber, his gaze baleful as he said, "Then I'll fight." Succinct and to the point. He Lan Yun instantly revealed a besotted look. What she liked was precisely things like Can Yi's icy cold and fearless personality, but Wind Moon Sect's young master intervened, and losing or winning were both inappropriate, making her worry again. A mere first-layer flower blossom tier cripple even dares to be impudent in front of this young master. Hu Qingfang sneered, and attacked Can Yi. The weapon he used was a spiked club covered with symbols. It was now activated, sparkling and emitting a terrifying presence. Can Yi's saber was still 9-hoop Heaven Hero Blade, a 5th-tier spirit tool, which couldn't keep up with his tier anymore. But it couldn't be helped, he was just a 5th-tier martial artist who'd crossed into the Flower Blossom tier not long ago, so how could he possibly obtain a 6th-tier spirit tool? However, he was still fearless, brandishing the long saber with chilling saber intent and charging towards Hu Qingfang. Ping! Ping, pang, pang, the two battled noisily. Hu Qingfang was certainly strong. He was at the 7th layer of the flower blossom tier, and his battle prowess reached 10 stars, suppressing Kan Yi by 3 stars. Moreover, the weapon in his hand was a 6th tier spirit tool, so he obviously had a great advantage. However, Kan Yi was extremely tenacious, and counterattacked repeatedly despite the disadvantageous situation, attacking to defend and fighting so desperately that Hu Qingfang had to give up on attacks to defend, otherwise, both sides would be defeated and wounded. For Hu Qingfang, he was obviously unwilling to be defeated and wounded by Kan Yi. Firstly, his strength was higher, and secondly, with his identity, how could a stray martial artist compare with his noble body? It was precisely such a qualm that rendered him unable to defeat Kan Yi even in the situation where he clearly had the advantage, falling into a stalemate. Ling Han smiled slightly, and opened up his hand secretly. An arrow of origin power condensed, xiao, firing at Hu Qingfang. Now, no one noticed him, and he intentionally dissolved the color of this arrow that was condensed by origin power. Although its power decreased because of this, he didn't want to take Hu Qingfang's life. As the arrow swept by, Hu Qingfang wasn't on his guard at all, and was shot on the knee, instantly staggering and almost falling down. Kan Yi took the chance to strike with his saber, Shua, bringing out a splash of blood. Ah! Hu Qingfang screamed. The saber struck on his shoulder and almost severed his bones, making him deeply pained. What made him even gloomier was that he actually hadn't figured out the situation, and just felt his right leg go numb. What happened? Zhu Xian and Hu Niu looked towards Ling Han. Others didn't notice, because they didn't care about Ling Han, a nobody at the spiritual ocean tier, at all. They both smiled gently. As females, they obviously disliked people like Hu Qingfang extremely. However, Hu Qingfang's tier was higher after all, and his battle prowess was stronger. The saber wound wasn't very heavy, either, and he soon pulled himself together, charging back at Kan Yi. Ling Han smiled inwardly. His right hand spread, and another annihilating dragon star arrow shot out. His battle prowess now crossed into the spiritual infant tier, and even if he didn't use a physical bow, this annihilating dragon star arrow was still extremely formidable. In addition, he also adhered the power of lighting to it, and saw through Hu Qingfang's weak spots with the eye of truth. 3 mystical powers together. Hu Qingfang should feel honored being hit by them. It was quite the rare occurrence, after all. Hu Qingfang staggered once more, and was struck by Kan Yi's saber again. As other people saw it, it was as if Kan Yi already anticipated he would make such an error, waiting there for him in advance. They couldn't help but be shocked, since such control over a fight was too astounding. With this foresight, Kan Yi obviously took the upper hand with an extremely large advantage, striking at Hu Qingfang to the point where he couldn't endure it anymore. After a few dozen moves, he ran into the carriage, and shouted, "Cripple, you dare go against me? You've got yourself into big trouble." Kan Yi swept across his chest, and said, "Come out to fight." There was no way Hu Qingfang dared to come out. He thought that the sudden numbness in his legs was from some sort of mystic art that Kan Yi used. He was already scared out of his wits. This brat didn't care about his identity as Wind Moon Sect's sect master's son, and slashed fatally with each strike. If he fought him any longer, he would truly die here. "If I don't take my revenge, I won't be able to live anymore," he shouted, and with a call, the 4 beautiful women came back into the carriage one after another. Kan Yi still wanted to chase, but a light barrier rose up on the carriage, blocking him. "Don't chase. That's Wind Moon Sect's ancient war chariot, and if there's an elite controlling it, it can even unleash spiritual infant tier attacks." Qin Yi Yu waved her hand to stop Kan Yi, not letting him continue the chase. Kan Yi, however, looked towards Ling Han, and after seeing Ling Han shake his head too, Kan Yi then stored his saber into a spatial ring. "I'll wait for you," he said indifferently. Hu Qingfang roared angrily, but could only drive the carriage and run back the way he came. Chapter 606, Shameless. Chapter 606, Shameless. Reverie _ You've got into a big trouble. Cho Zifei immediately shouted at Ling Han. "You know who he is. Wind Moon Sect's sect master's son." Wind Moon sect has heaven-tier elites. Can you afford to provoke such a force? Exactly, you're going to get us killed. Center Jian Sen also said. Kan Yi sneered, and said, if your wife, mother, and daughter were in this situation, could you guys also speak such words and watch indifferently on the side? No one spoke, but their expressions couldn't be clearer. They didn't encounter such a situation, so did supposing have any meaning? Qin Yi Yu smiled instead, and said, although our Dark Glory Valleys strength as a whole falls short of Winter Moon sects, we're not to be humiliated as they please. This matter is bound to be grievances between juniors, and it's impossible for figures too strong to intervene, or else it'll trigger a full-out war between two factions. Only after hearing her words was everyone somewhat calmer. Let's go. This place is still within the boundaries of the Winter Moon sect. Although it's not the core area, I've heard there are peak stage flower blossom tier elites here, and they're not easily dealt with. Qin Yi Yu went on. Her temperament was graceful and she was also beautiful, having an inherent spirit of a leader. Therefore, she immediately became everyone's center and led them. Everyone promptly nodded their heads. This was still Winter Moon sect's territory, so it'd be better escape quickly. They didn't dare walk on the main roads again. Deviating into the forest by the side, they didn't fly, either. It'd consume origin power and might not be fast enough, so they simply ran on the ground covertly, which was fast and strength-saving. At night, they stopped to rest and raised a fire to roast rations and dried meat, and began conversing at the same time. So you guys are also going to the Restore Heaven Academy? After listening to everyone talk, Qin Yi Yu nodded, and said, I'm also going there, but ended up encountering Hu Qingfang half a month ago, being entangled with him constantly. Luckily, I received everyone's help. Only Kan Yi intervened, while the others even reprimanded him afterwards, but she knew how to conduct herself, and obviously wouldn't bring this up and make the atmosphere awkward. Some people looked ashamed. Chou Zifei was self-content and smug as if it were as she said, with everyone helping in the time of danger, more so, even as if it hadn't been Kan Yi who rescued her, but him. Lady Qin, no need to worry. If Hu Qingfang dares to come again, see if I won't defeat him utterly, he boasted without shame. Who didn't know how to talk big? It was to ingratiate himself with a beauty anyway, so no matter how big the talk, he could still blow it up to the skies. Pu. Other people still had scruples and didn't laugh out loud, but Hunyo absolutely didn't know what giving face was, instantly bursting into laughter. Little girl, what are you laughing at? Chou Zifei blew off the skies with the big talk, and obviously feared most being uncovered and humiliated, so with this little girl's laughter, he was angered from humiliation and glared at her. Is it not funny? Kan Yi drew his saber and glowered at Chou Zifei. Such a cute little girl. Qin Yi Yu reached out to hug Hunyo. Though the little girl was painted with a clown face now, it still couldn't hide her bizarreness and endearingness. Ugly girl, don't dream of hugging Lord Nyo. Hunyo retreated hurriedly as if avoiding bad luck. However, she complied with Ling Han's instructions, and didn't use power recklessly, so how could she evade a mid-level flower blossom tier's reach? She was instantly embraced by Qin Yi Yu, and her small head was buried in Qin Yi Yu's lofty breasts. Nyo's going to suffocate. Ugly girl, hurry up and move your fat away from Nyo's face, or Nyo will flip out. Hunyo gesticulated and bawled. Chou Zifei and the other 4 men looked on enviously, thinking if they could personally change places with Hunyo. Instantly, they almost felt a nosebleed spurting out. Qin Yi Yu also couldn't help but laugh, and let go. Hunyo hurriedly fled back to Ling Han and hid in his embrace, then asked Ling Han in a sweet voice, this ugly girl wants to use her fat to suffocate Nyo, can Nyo beat her silly? How detestable, to actually want to conspire to murder the cute Nyo. With her mentioning the fat on her chest twice, Qin Yi Yu was somewhat flushed. This little girl was cute, but she spoke so. Why was it called fat? It was clearly 2 firm and upright mountain peaks, so how was it at all related to fat? They were at most a bit larger than usual. Qin Yi Yu was still quite self-satisfied, and sometimes, when she admired herself in the mirror, she felt a tiny sort of bitterness. In the future, who knew which man would be allowed close to them? Ling Han laughed, and said, forget it. She just likes you, So be generous like a lord and don't argue with her. Hunyo bit on her finger and thought for a while, then finally said, all right, Nyo's a magnanimous person, so Nyo won't fuss over minor matters with the ugly girl. Though that was what she said, her slippery gaze didn't seem to be letting the matter go so easily. Other people didn't know what the little girl was capable of, so they all laughed loudly, feeling that children's words carried no harm. They thought that if she knew how terrifying Chinyin, a medium-level flower blossom Tirelite, was, she probably wouldn't dare to say such words. When eating, Hunyo definitely wouldn't treat herself unfairly, and took out the food within the spatial ring. Those were vegetables and beast meat nourished within the Black Tower, their taste absolutely delicious, instantly making people drool from the smell. Cho Zi-fei and the other 5 had already smelled it 3 days ago, but were embarrassed to ask a little girl for food. Now, they could only speed up swallowing their saliva. However, Qin Yi was truly fond of Hunyo. Walking over without caring, she said, beautiful Nyo, can sister get a piece? Hunyo thought for a while with her head tilted, and said, fine. She divided up a small piece of meat, then wrapped it up with raw vegetables, handing it over to Qin Yi, and said, this is a new eating method Nyo invented, called vegetable-wrapped meat. Qin Yi opened her small mouth and bit right on the vegetable-wrapped meat, slowly chewing. She originally just wanted to tease Hunyo, and wasn't really fond of food, but once she chewed on it, her delicate face changed color. How could it be so delicious? The lightness of the vegetables fused with the roasted meat's richness complemented each other's strong points, stimulating her taste buds. She felt as if she'd reached some sort of climax, and her face instantly flushed red. For a moment, her brain was as if it had short-circuited, and she only felt ceaseless stimulation, making her involuntarily moan. Like a cat's cry, it tickled people's hearts. Cho Zi-fei and the other 4 men almost howled collectively. This moan was too alluring, and made them unable to bear the wish of transforming into evil wolves, pouncing at that enchanting little white sheep. Unfortunately, this little white sheep possessed terrifying strength. Unless they were tired of living, how would they dare pounce on her? Qin Lian finally came back to her senses after a long while, and involuntarily blushed with shame. To actually moan from eating a bite of food, how embarrassing. No matter how delicious it was, she shouldn't have done that and act as if she hadn't eaten for 3 lifetimes. 11. Hunyo then revealed a devilish smile. You'll definitely want to eat more after eating such a delicious thing, but I'm not giving it to you. Let you crave it to death, for actually daring to use 2 lumps of meat to squish your lord Nyo. Chapter 607, Attacked Again. Chapter 607, Attacked Again. Reverie _ As expected, Qin Lian couldn't control herself with such delicacies, and also liked little girls like Hunyo. She lowered her posture and asked Hunyo for food, but Hunyo wouldn't pay attention to her, and just ate self-absorbedly with juices dripping everywhere. Everyone swallowed their saliva constantly, craving for food. All right, seeing how miserable you look, I'll give you another piece. At last, Hunyo divided another piece of meat for Qin Lian and wrapped it with vegetables, passing it into Qin Lian's small mouth. She didn't have good intentions, and wanted Qin Lian to still keep thinking about it. The little girl was very keen on holding grudges. As expected, this night, Qin Lian had trouble sleeping. It wouldn't have mattered if she hadn't tasted that umami, but once she ate it and didn't satisfy the desire for good food, she suffered much more. However, it also made her extremely curious what meat exactly it was and how the vegetables were planted to have such tastiness. On the second day, Qin Lian targeted Ling Han, and asked him about the origin of those meat and vegetables. Ling Han was pestered beyond annoyance, and said, that's not beast meat, but human meat. The vegetables, well, were of course planted with humans as fertilizer. He said it balefully, which made Qin Lian's delicate face twitch ceaselessly as she retreated in defeat right away. This made Hunyo convulse with laughter, finally feeling that revenge had been taken. Qin Lian obviously wouldn't believe it. She hadn't eaten human meat, but as a martial artist, how could she not have seen human flesh? It wasn't like this at all. She could conclude that the beast meat she ate yesterday was luxurious musk deer, a beast whose meat was known for succulence. She had eaten it many times, but not even once was it as delicious as the one the previous day. She was truly worried. Would she have appetite for other things in the future? Cho Zifei and the other four were all very interested in Qin Lianyu, circling and ingratiating themselves with her in every way possible. This girl was not only beautiful like a celestial, but also extraordinary in identity, being Dark Glory Valley's master's junior disciple. If they could marry her, then their own status would increase a whole lot, and even their families would climb higher along with them. In the martial arts world, for spiritual infant tier, deity transformation tier, and heaven tier, the difference between each was like heaven and earth, the ranks strict. The five of them only had background of the deity transformation tier, and obviously wanted to claim connections with a true disciple of the Dark Glory Valley. Not to mention that just Qin Lianyu's exceptional beauty alone was enough. However, Qin Lianyu wouldn't possibly care about them. She was courteous to them for the sake of Kan Yi, otherwise, how would she put up with these craven and cowardly people? Other than practicing martial arts, she liked most to search for various delicacies, and obviously thought constantly of Hunyou's food, so she inquired Zhu Xian. She presumed that these foods were definitely not prepared by the little girl personally, and the adults by her side were just Ling Han and Zhu Xian. However, Ling Han already scared her off, and she obviously wouldn't look for trouble again, so she could only find Zhu Xian. Whatever the two girls talked about, they both laughed sweetly, and soon became very intimate, making Ling Han and Hunyou astonished. Women, truly strange creatures. Ling Han shrugged his shoulders. Yes. Hunyou gnawed on food while revealing a distressed look, and said, then Nyou's done for. If Nyou grows up, then Nyou will become such strange girl, but if Nyou doesn't grow up, how can Nyou marry Ling Han? Ling Han laughed loudly, rubbed Hunyou's head, and said, then don't grow up, it's also good this way. He always had a knot in his heart. Perhaps when Hunyou grew up, the strange spirit base in her dantian would take her over. A being like that was too terrifying, as its imposingness alone could annihilate his heaven tier's divine sense. Hunyou wouldn't be able to resist at all. No, Nyou wants to marry Ling Han. Ling Han is Nyou's. Hunyou squeezed into Ling Han's embrace and hugged him forcefully. Ah, you're strangling me to death. Ling Han bawled. 11:11. Hunyou laughed heartily. You guys are quite happy, huh? A sneer sounded out as a carriage flew over from the sky, and stopped in front of them with a turn. The carriage, 15 meters long and 10 meters high, was as if a moving castle, and four scantily clad beautiful women sat in the location of the coachman. The winter moon set and Hu Qingfang, he came again. However, before everyone shouted questions, an extremely resounding cry came from the carriage, wave after wave, as if the tide. This was a girl's moan, quite hysterical, and the carriage even trembled at an extremely high frequency. Experienced people obviously knew what was going on once they heard it, and they were instantly flabbergasted. Doing that sort of thing with so openly? Ling Han covered Hunyou's ears, then revealed a displeased look, and said, Kan Yi? Yes. Kan Yi immediately responded, leaping out and striking with his saber. Xiao, 9 flashes of saber chi dispersed, and turned into 10 streaks along with the saber, slashing at the carriage. Impudence! The four beautiful women leapt out one after another, meeting Kan Yi's assault. Peng, 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 peng. Amidst the fierce confrontation, the four beautiful women retreated in defeat one after another, but Kan Yi's attack was also neutralized. A long exhalation could be heard from within the carriage. The carriage's intense trembling immediately stopped as a woman said, Young sect master's skills are getting better and better. Your humble servant almost died. Ha 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 ha. Hu Qingfang's proud laughter came from within the carriage. Such words were probably the praise that men loved to hear most from women. The carriage door opened, and out came 3 people. It was actually a threesome earlier. They surely knew how to play, not only having car sex, but also with 3 people at once. The man was obviously Hu Qingfang. He bared his upper body, and only wore a pair of loose briefs while carrying a woman whose clothes didn't cover her body, revealing it in all sorts of places. Another woman stood next to him. She looked a little over 30, maintaining herself quite well. Her skin was snow-white and tender, her bosom was round and bulging, her buttocks were plump and protruding, large and round. She wore a loose skirt. At first glance, it was all right, But once the mountain breeze blew and lifted the edges of the skirt, inside was actually completely bare, enough to make people cover their faces in embarrassment. Yang Yingshe, Yang Yingyun, Qing Lian Yu cried out. Her gaze was kept on the two girls whose clothes didn't cover their bodies, revealing an intense and scrupulous look. Be careful, these are Winter Moon Sect's two leaders at this place, and are both in the peak stage of the flower blossom tier. TSK, 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 it's rare for Lady Qin to recognize us sisters. What a real honor, the beautiful woman standing on her own said. She was Yang Yingyun, while the other one still indulging in Hu Qingfang's embrace was Yang Yingshe. Temptress, Qin Lian Yu said in disdain, her gaze full of contempt. Yang Yingyun giggled, letting the wind reveal her all over, and said, "What does an unexperienced little girl know? Women need men's nourishment constantly to stay beautiful. This way, hey, it's convenient to do things. Vulgar." Qin Lian Yu castigated her. Can Yi let out a battle cry, and charged towards the carriage. The order he received was to kill. Chapter 608, Crushed by Strength. Chapter 608, Crushed by Strength. Reverie _ Can Yi attacked, and Saber Chi moved unhindered, it's might shocking. Yang Yingyun giggled, then twisted her fat buttocks and shifted her figure as she reached out with her slender hand, trying to grab the long blade to seize control over it with bare hands. Can Yi snorted and turned the longer saber, pointing the edge downwards and sweeping it towards Yang Yingyun. An insensitive, boorish man. Girls are to be loved, and you can mess around on the bed however you like, just afraid that you won't use enough force, but when striking them, it's better to be gentler. Yang Yingyun flipped, and didn't mind at all revealing herself a little. This made Zhu Xian Qin Lian Yu, and He Lan Yun's flush, even seething with anger. How could there be such a shameless woman? Absolutely shameless. However, Yang Yingyun was very strong. She certainly was at the peak stage flower blossom tier, and her battle prowess reached 12 stars. She couldn't count as too strong of a genius, but she was already very strong. After all, Can Yi had only 7 stars of battle prowess. This was a complete stomp. But Yang Yingyun's strength was only 2 stars higher than Hu Qingfang's, and she still dared to charge over, clearly having something to rely on. Hu Qingfang couldn't help but feel it strange. Why did Can Yi become so weak all of a sudden? When he'd fought Can Yi earlier, he lost out repeatedly, having no choice but to give up. If Can Yi only had such battle prowess, why would he have to run away so sorrily? I'll help you. Qin Liang Yu charged out with her sword and joined hands with Can Yi, combining their strengths to battle Yang Yingyun. However, while Qin Lian Yu was exceptionally talented, her cultivation was also a bit too low, the 4th layer of the flower blossom tier with 10 stars battle prowess. The two together still couldn't make up for the gap in power against Yang Yingyun, and were still at a disadvantage. Chou Zifei and the others instantly thought of running. If Qin Liang Yu and Can Yi were not their match, staying to fight would only lead to death. Ling Han pulled out her annihilating dragon star arrow, and invisible arrow chi instantly shot towards Yang Yunying. The arrow chi was invisible, and although its power was also much inferior, it was superior in its concealment, and couldn't be better to trip someone. Yang Yingyun was hit as expected. An arrow struck her knee, she staggered, and almost fell to the ground. Can Yi and Qin Lian Yu took the advantage of it to counterattack, and suppressed Yang Yingyu, temporarily gaining the upper hand. Yang Yingyun wanted to counterattack, but her knee kept being hit by arrows, making her only able to constantly yell angrily. That again, Hu Qingfang muttered, he was defeated in this way. What methods did the opponent use exactly? Yang Yingshe stretched her head out from Hu Qingfang's embrace, revealing a strange look. She felt the surge of a smear of origin power, but it passed in a flash, making her unable to confirm it. She giggled, and said, "Younger sister, want your older sister to help you?" "Okay." Yang Yingyun flew right back onto the carriage. Qin Lian Yu and Can Yi wanted to chase, but saw Yang Yingshe strike with a palm, with vein-like patterns spreading, turning into a resplendent ray. Can Yi and Qin Lian Yu both turned pale with fright, and hurriedly sprung backwards rapidly. Spiritual infant tear. The two of them said quaveringly, even their bodies somewhat shivered. What could they do? Spiritual infant Tear absolutely crushed Flower Blossom Tear opponents, not to mention that one of them was at low stage, and another at a medium stage of the Flower Blossom Tear. It would be useless even if all of them were at peak stage of the Flower Blossom Tear. No wonder Hu Qingfang dared to fight back. As it turned out, he'd called out a spiritual infant Tear elite. T, what to do now? Ha 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 ha. Hu Qingfang laughed loudly. Never expected it, right? Sub-branch Master Ying Sha advanced into the spiritual infant Tear half a year ago. Suppressing you few mere Flower Blossom Tear warriors is obviously as easy as the turn of the palm for her. Everyone was shocked. With a spiritual infant Tear elite on the scene, it would be difficult for them to escape, let alone make a comeback. Gagij 1. Yang Ying Sha walked off the carriage, swaying her plump buttocks, and sweet her gaze past the few men one by one. She said, "Your humble servant loves these strong little guys the most, not only full of vigor but also full of yang qi, greatly tonic. Older sister, you can't enjoy them alone." Yang Yingyun said hurriedly. "Pa." Hu Qingfang slapped her buttocks, and smiled lewdly. "This young master didn't satisfy your appetite. Young sect master too only has one treasured stick, but your humble servants are sisters. Moreover, doesn't young sect master still have to take care of Lady Qin?" Yang Yingyun was not at all embarrassed, and instead swung her plump buttocks, acting coquettishly. Yang Yunsha turned around, and said, "Young sister, if you absorb these men's qi of origin yang, you'll have 50% chance to charge into the spiritual infant Tear." Yang Yingyun was exulted. She said, "Then thank you for the trouble, sister." Yang Yingsha nodded while giggling, and said, "These handsome brothers, want to spend the spring night with us sisters? We'll definitely let you handsome brothers fully enjoy the worldly pleasures with women." Cho Zifei and the others' faces changed color. The sisters were going to harvest yang to nourish yin. With Wind Moon sect's viciousness falling into their hands, no matter male or female, one would definitely be harvested of all their vigor and die. Yang Yingsha looked towards Hu Niu, and turned to ask Hu Qingfang. There's also a little girl. 1111, young sect master, want me to leave her to you? Kill her. Hu Qingfang waved his hands. He only wanted to make love with Qin Lian Yu. Although there were countless beauties in the world, but comparisons were the scariest. Compared to Qin Lian Yu, no matter He Lan Yun or the Yang sisters, they all paled in comparison, being way too far apart. Hu Niu exploded with anger. They were actually going to kill such a cutie like her? She jumped out of Ling Han's embrace, pointed at Yang Yingsha, and said, "Old hag, Niu will kill you." She then pondered, and turned to ask, "Can Niu kill her?" "Yes." Ling Han nodded. Hu Niu's enthusiasm for killing was too big, and probably couldn't be changed in this lifetime, so she could only be guided by making her kill people that deserved to be killed. Gegegage. Yang Yingsha laughed wantonly. Could there be anything more laughable? A 7 to 8-year-old little girl actually said she'd kill her. It made her feel as if she was listening to a joke. "Niu will warm up first." Hu Niu raised her hands and split her legs, appearing very serious. Everyone wanted to laugh but couldn't, as they were faced with a hopeless situation. "I'll restrain them, you guys retreat." Qin Lian Q decided promptly. She was the one who involved everyone in this disaster, so at this moment, she wanted to take this heavy burden alone. "Go, go, go." Cho Zifei and the other 4 men said hurriedly. Although they'd hate to part with an exceptional beauty like Qin Lian Yu, compared to them dying from being deprived of all their qi of origin yang, they'd rather let the beauty die. "Think you can leave?" Yang Yingsha laughed grimly. How could a spiritual infant Tear attack possibly be blocked by a middle-stage Flower Blossom Tear warrior? Qin Lian Yu placed the sword to her own neck, and said, "If you dare take a step forward, I'll immediately kill myself." Yingsha branch master, Hu Qingfang hurriedly shouted. His target was Qin Lian Yu, and if the beauty died, then wouldn't his efforts be in vain? Yang Yingsha snorted and halted, yet laughed coldly. "What a bunch of good men, actually letting a girl sacrifice herself to rescue you guys. What men you've made of yourself." Cho Zifei and the other 4 held their tongues, but thought that when they attained certain cultivation in the future, they would come for vengeance. Nyo's done warming up. Ugly hag, take this fist. Nyo jumped twice and raised her small fist. Look at Nyo's ultimate move, Nyo's ascending dragon fist, one punch annihilation. Shoo, she darted out. Chapter 609, All Shocked Down. Chapter 609, All Shocked Down. Reverie _ Shoo, she was like a lightning, faster than the naked eye could capture. At least, it was extremely hard to capture for spiritual infant tier warriors. Yang Ying should just reach the spiritual infant tier, and besides, who would be vigilant towards a 7 to 8-year-old little girl? Without a single bit of attention placed on Nyo, she only felt a blur in front of her eyes, yet Nyo already dashed before her. She cried out not good inwardly, and still wanted to leap backwards, but Nyo already fired a punch, smashing her chin. Peng, Yang Yingshi was sent flying. The terrifying impact assailed her, knocking her right out. Ka, a crisp sound of a bone snapping could be heard. Losing the defense of origin power, spiritual infant tier physique was extremely fragile. Her head was picked right off by Nyo. Yang Yingshi instantly woke up again, and as her eyes opened, she revealed a terrified expression, while her headless body fell. Nyo landed, and casually raising her hand, she tossed the head away. Yang Yingshi's body hurriedly rushed after it as blood continued to spurt out from the severed neck, but after dashing over 10 steps, she fell onto the ground abruptly. Her hands and legs twitched a few more times, and forever stopped in their movements. A dignified spiritual infant tier was easily deprived of her head by a little girl, and thus killed on the spot. The entire scene was nothing but silence. Qin Lian Yu, He Yun Lan, Cho Zi Fei, and the others all knew Nyo and even ate with her. But now, their legs were shivering, and they felt like fainting. This little girl was too frightening. Qin Lian Yu thought more of how the little girl was extremely out of sorts and asked Ling Han if she could kill her. At the time, it obviously sounded like a joke, but looking again now, the little girl had clearly been serious. Unknowingly, she actually circled before death's door, making her break out in a cold sweat, overcome by a terrible chill. Hu Qingfang and Yang Ying finally came back to their senses, and hurriedly fled back into the carriage. Go, go, he urged the 4 beautiful women to drive the carriage away. Want to kill the cute Nyo? Nyo's mad. Nyo broke into a chase. She turned into lightning and arrived above the carriage in a flash, smashing with a fist. Wang, a light screen spread open and blocked her fist. After all, this was spiritual infant tier, and the little girl was only in the high stage of the flower blossom tier. Her fists couldn't break through it. Hu Qingfang now recovered slightly from the shock, and shouted harshly, "Ha ha ha, come, come. Want to kill this young master? You still have to cultivate another 1,000, 10,000 years." Nyo burst with anger, opening her small mouth and biting the light screen. Catcher, catcher, even the light screen couldn't withstand Nyo's teeth, instantly breaking apart. However, it was activated by origin power, and the shattered light screen was immediately restored, as if racing with Nyo wreaking destruction. In a short amount of time, both sides seemed to be equally matched. Hu Qingfang was scared out of his wits once again, and once more hurriedly shouted, "Go, go." The 4 beautiful women hurriedly prompted the carriage, speeding towards the sky. Shoo, the carriage soon disappeared on the horizon. Qin Lian Yu and the others were still motionless, dumbstruck. The impact they'd received was really too great. After a long while, a flash of lightning could be seen as Nyo returned. She pouted sourly and put her hands on her hips, and said, "No fun, they ran away. You were fierce enough, killing a spiritual infant tier with 1 hit, and tearing through spiritual infant tier with 1 bite. This could make the entire world tremble if it were to be known." At this time, everyone looked towards Nyo as if an alarm bell had just been struck. This time, their gazes no longer had any hint of belittlement. This was a small devil, capable of killing them. After a fight, Nyo's hungry. Nyo stuck to Ling Han, and said fawningly, "Can Nyo eat another piece of meat?" "No, you already ate enough today." Ling Han shook his head, definitively not allowing it. "Just eat another small piece, just a small piece," Nyo said in a spoiled manner. No means no. Ling Han was resolute. Stingy, Nyo's going to turn bad. Hu Nyo pouted and got angry. Everyone broke into a cold sweat for Ling Han. This was a little devil that broke off a spiritual infant Tier's head, and you damn dared to disobey her. Weren't you afraid that she'd flip out and twist off your neck to use it as a wine cup? However, what surprised everyone was that Hu Nyo actually didn't cause a disturbance, and glued to Ling Han again shortly, begging piteously. Finally, when she got a piece of dried meat, she was unbelievably happy. This was absolutely unbelievable. They were all touched. It turned out this little girl was a chowhound, and could be bought with food. If they could kidnap this little girl who possessed the strength to kill low-stage spiritual infant Tier opponents, then how strong would she be when she grew to her teens or 20s? Profit. They hurriedly took out dried meat to entice Hu Nyo, thinking that Ling Han was truly a fool. Such a strong underling obviously needed to be won over properly, and you were actually stingy with a few pieces of meat. Hadn't you heard the old saying, if you didn't give up your child, you couldn't hit the wolf? This wasn't really taking your child, but just a few pieces of meat. However, they couldn't possibly move Hu Nyo, and were all kicked over. Now, if it weren't for her restrained tendency to kill, she would definitely decimate them all for bothering her. Qin Lian Yu's beautiful eyes concentrated on Ling Han. She thought of the situation earlier, when Yang Yingyun inexplicably staggered repeatedly, which was something unimaginable for an expert. Now, combined with Hu Nyo's freakishness, she had a bold guess. Could it be that Ling Han also possessed terrifying strength that could control this ferocious little girl? Ugly person, staring at Nyo's Ling Han? You're planning something bad, right? Hu Nyo suddenly appeared before Qin Lian Yu. Her small face looked full of vigilance. She really couldn't be careless, since there was always someone having ideas about her Ling Han. Qin Lian Yu didn't think too much of it, and assumed that the little girl enunciated it unclearly, saying Ling Han's name wrong. She smiled faintly, and said, Nyo Nyo, where's Sister Ugly? Everywhere's ugly, Hu Nyo said sternly, and went on pointing at Zhu Xian. Not even prettier than that ugly monster, so where are you not ugly? Qin Lian Yu couldn't help but smile. Her beauty surpassed Zhu Xian by countless times, but she obviously wouldn't say it. Instead, she simply asked, Nyo Nyo, is your Lingyun formidable? Of course, as formidable as Nyo, Hu Nyo immediately said, her face full of pride. Oh. Qin Lian Yu's beautiful eyes lit up. She knew that Ling Han definitely didn't look that ordinary. Chapter 610 Extreme Destruction Murderous King. Chapter 610 Extreme Destruction Murderous King. Reverie _ The party resumed their journey. After this incident, obviously no one dared to make sarcastic comments about Ling Han again. They weren't scared of Ling Han, but of Hu Nyo. This little girl was too glued to Ling Han, so wouldn't whoever spoke ill of Ling Han fear being beaten by the little girl? This girl was a demon, relentless when it came to killing people. They were more envious of Ling Han, riding on such a coattail. Each one of them wasn't convinced at all with Ling Han. Why him? Traveling for 2 days, they were caught up with again. It was still Hu Qingfang. Ling Han was truly somewhat impressed. Just how unafraid of death was this guy, running away twice yet still daring to return? No, it should be, just how lecherous was this guy, for him to think constantly of Qin Lian Yu? Ha 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 ha, this young master's returned again. It was still the same carriage controlled by the same 4 beautiful women. The only difference was that there were no decadent sounds that came from within the carriage. Need an applause? Ling Han said with a smile. Applause? Don't think about living even if you guys kowtow. Hu Qingfang's voice resounded. The cabin opened, and he walked out side by side with an old man. Ling Han turned pale with fright, and said, Never would have thought that you guys of the Winter Moon sect are not only all lecherous, but also shirt lifters. Really can't bear to look straight at you. Dirty, truly too dirty. Nonsense. Hu Qingfang hurriedly jumped off. They, the Winter Moon sect, obviously had no scruples with love affairs. On the contrary, they were proud of it, thinking that the pleasures between men and women were a type natural law, but men and men bleg. Then what? A man and another man alone, With you two squeezing together, did nothing happen? Ling Han said deliberately. Junior, impudence. The old man immediately snorted. His voice was as if squeezed out from metal, full of sharpness and destructive power. Cho Zifei and the others immediately bled from their eyes, ears, and noses. Only Qin Lian Yu was an exception because her tier was higher. Of course, Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er, and Hu Niu also didn't. Ling Han and Hu Niu's battle prowess was strong enough, while Zhu Xian'er received Ling Han's protection. Extreme destruction, murderous king, Duan Ming Da. Qin Lian Yu immediately cried out. Gaga, little lady, never expected you to recognize this old man. TSK, 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 you truly look pretty good. If the young sect master didn't fancy you, even this old man would want to cultivate jointly with you. The old man laughed uncannily, looking at Qin Lian Yu with a lustful gaze. Extreme destruction, murderous king Duan Ming Da, peak stage of the spiritual infant tier. Qin Lian Yu went on. Everyone was in despair. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier was too strong for them. Although Hu Niu was fierce, she was in the flower blossom tier after all, and being able to annihilate Yang Yingshe was also because it was a completely unexpected that she'd attack. Who could anticipate that a 7 to 8-year-old little girl could break into such speed? But now, Duan Ming Da had definitely taken precautions, and he was in the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, definitely not comparable to Yang Yingshe who had just crossed into this tier. It was over. Such a thought arose within everyone's minds. Lord Duan, except for those women, kill all the rest. Hu Qingfang shouted. Yes, young sect master. Duan Ming Da accepted the order, and he looked towards everyone balefully as he muttered, whom should I kill first? Clearly knowing that Duan Ming Da was just playing with them, Cho Zifei and the others still felt a chill arise within, and couldn't help but look towards the others, all hoping that they themselves wouldn't be the first to be slaughtered. Gaga, this old man is asking you guys, whom should I kill first? Duan Ming Da said threateningly. He loved most to play with people's hearts and make people fight internally, then set about to kill people, admiring their expressions of despair and regret. Cho Zifei and the others looked at each other, then pointed at Ling Han altogether, and said, him. Don't fall for his trick. He Lan Yun shouted. No matter what, he won't let us go. Fight it out with him. Fight what? You're not the one to die. Cho Zifei shouted. He Lan Yun almost died from an excess of anger. Would her ending be any better than death? Ling Han sighed, and said, there's a saying, if you don't seek death, then you won't die. Originally, seeing that we're in the same party, I wouldn't have minded saving you guys, but now, even if others don't kill you, I'll slaughter you guys. Such an arrogant tone, a mere spiritual ocean tier garbage. Cho Zifei and the other 5 all snorted. Now, they could only retain a shred of confidence before Ling Han. This brat only abducted a strange little girl who was super strong. Did he really think himself a spiritual infant tier elite? Ha 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 ha. Duan Ming Da laughed loudly. He loved the most to see internal strife like this. Lord Duan, please hurry and attack, Hu Qingfang urged. Duan Ming Da looked at Ling Han, and said, since everyone decided to kill you first, this old man will comply with everyone's suggestion and slaughter you first. If you have the strength, then feel free to bring it on, Ling Han said indifferently. Ha ha, such an arrogant youngster. Duan Ming Da laughed grimly, and his gaze swept past Hu Niu. This little girl was the one who killed Yang Yingshe? His first reaction when he heard the news was that it was absurd. Now, after personally witnessing, this feeling became more intense. Was it possible? Little girl, attack, and let this old man see what you've got. He provoked. Hu Niu snorted, and said, Ling Han will take care of you, so Niu won't attack. Duan Ming Da didn't have any unusual reaction towards this name. After all, this was the middle state, and perhaps the divine treasure trove's news only circulated between elites or young prodigies. Haha, this boy is really that formidable. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, formidable or not, you'll know after we fight. Arrogant, so arrogant. This old man loves the most to kill people like you, it's so invigorating. Duan Ming Da laughed loudly, and extended his right hand, with vein-like patterns lightening up and emitting a terrifying coercive pressure. Peak stage spiritual infant tier elite were just this powerful. Ling Han was fearless, and said with a smile, "Are you intimidating me?" "Not intimidating, this is genuine pressure," Duan Ming Da said, smiling, and pressed the void at Ling Han. Hong, endless origin power surged and turned into a vast body, pressing down towards Ling Han. "Are you courting death?" Ling Han's figure flashed, and with lightning overflowing, xiao, he appeared before Duan Ming Da and launched a fist. So fast. Everyone was greatly shocked. This high speed was almost comparable to Hu Niu's. Duan Ming Da didn't believe in Hu Niu's strength, yet was still somewhat vigilant, but towards Ling Han, he truly didn't guard at all. A mere spiritual ocean tier. Could he really turn over the skies? Obviously not. Once Ling Han attacked, he was fast as lightning, and the old man couldn't guard in time at all. He could only tilt his face, and peng, his cheek was still scraped by the fist's momentum, and blood instantly oozed out. He hurriedly dashed backwards, but as he retreated, Ling Han advanced. Like shadow following the body, Ling Han kept close to half a feet before him, making him shiver all over. What the hell? Chapter 611, Battling Peak Stage Spiritual Infant Tier. Chapter 611, Battling Peak Stage Spiritual Infant Tier. Reverie _ Duan Ming Da retreated hurriedly, while Ling Han advanced hurriedly. The two were close all along, as if couple in love. However, Duan Ming Da had no romantic feelings, and only felt pins and needles. How could this youngster's speed be so fast? He was as if his shadow, unshakable and giving him chills all over. He wasn't at the spiritual ocean, but flower blossom tier, and a high stage of it at that, even approaching the peak stage. But the problem was, even peak stage flower blossom tier warriors shouldn't be so fierce. He was in the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and could kill any flower blossom tier expert several hundred times with a single finger, so how was it that he was forced to retreat repeatedly? Ling Han didn't just stick closely to him, brandishing his fists, attacked fiercely and repeatedly. Peng, 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 one punch after another, like raging tide, forced Duan Ming Da to ward off the blows and tilt his head continuously in the process of retreating so as to avoid being hit by Ling Han. One retreated, and the other advanced, instantly exchanging over 100 moves. Everyone stared agape, so, it turned out that Ling Han was also a fierce person. Earlier, Hu Niu killed an opponent at early stage of the spiritual infant tier with one punch, and though Ling Han's accomplishments weren't as eye-catching, his opponent was at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier. Now that Ling Han took action, everyone could obviously sense his presence at the late stage of the flower blossom tier, and they thought the same as Duan Ming Da shouldn't be that fierce. Considering that Hu Niu once demonstrated her extraordinary skills, they finally had a grasp of the so-called freaks being able to battle surpassing one's own tier and surpassing an entire large tier. Truly too freaking scary. Only Qin Lian Yu had speculated as such earlier, and wasn't as surprised as the others, though her beautiful eyes still stared open wide. Comparatively, could a prodigy like her still have the face to be classified as a prodigy? No, she was still a prodigy, but Hu Niu and Ling Han had already surpassed the level of prodigy, entering the level of freaks. Ah! Duan Ming Da roared. Hong, purple mist rose all over his body and was about to surround Ling Han. In the moment, Ling Han was unclear of the situation, and obviously wouldn't dare let the mist surround him. Shifting his figure with a flash, he was already over 3 meters away, staring coldly at the opponent. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier is nothing more than this, he said indifferently. The thunderclap ninth heaven coordinated with the devil fairy step allowed his speed to reach one of the deity transformation tier level, and be even more agile. Duan Ming Da bawled in anger. He wiped his face with his hand, and seeing that his hand was full of blood, he couldn't help but be even more furious. When bombarded by Ling Han's attacks earlier, although none landed sturdily, the fist's momentum that grazed him still cut open his face. This old man's handsome face, he said, flustered and exasperated. Ling Han was enjoying it, and said, "Could you still use your old face to pick up girls? TSK, 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 I'm rather impressed by you." The aunties that could be attracted by your old face, you still have the guts to lay your hands on them. With this, are you trying to gift warmth to these aunties? Impudent Junior, this old man will subdue and kill you. Duan Ming Da charged out again. This time, he unleashed a long brocade that looked like a silk-woven cloth, but was much larger, covered with designs of men and women making love. As it swayed in the wind, it seemed as if the people on it came to life and were battling fiercely. This wasn't an illusion, and there were even decadent sounds that could be heard, making people lose presence of mind. Spirit tool. However, Wind Moon sect spirit tools were also extremely obscene and evil, utilizing erotic pictures to disturb people's will. Kill. Duan Ming Ji roared loudly. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Amidst the brocade was also a resplendent light that fired at Ling Han, and Duan Ming Da himself also rushed over, spreading his terrifying presence and completely displaying the strength of the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier. Ling Han laughed loudly. If the opponent was Small Saber King, then he definitely wouldn't rival him yet. After all, he could battle surpassing tiers, but Small Saber King also could do that. At best, he could surpass more levels, but definitely couldn't remedy the gap of a big tier. However, it was different for Duan Ming Da. Being spiritual infant tier, his battle prowess was only around 10 stars, and Ling Han completely didn't fear him. Activating the thunderclap 9th heaven, he turned into a flash of lightning, and appeared before Duan Ming Da in a flash, bombarding him with both fists again. Boy, don't you dare. Duan Ming Da raised the purple mist to envelope Ling Han with it again. This was Wind Moon sect's secret legacy art. Facing outsiders, it could bewilder the opponent's mind, making them break out in lust and lose their mind, but for the people of Winter Moon sect, this was tonic, stimulating their spirit and clearing their minds. Ling Han used origin power to seal all the pores on his body. This time, he didn't retreat, and made a frontal attack. Peng, 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 the two battled fiercely. That brocade-like spirit tool was very effective as it kept shooting rays to bombard Ling Han. It also reached the late stage of the spiritual infant tier, and couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han had to dodge since his actual tier was only the flower blossom tier. With the help of this spirit tool, Duan Ming Da was barely able to fight evenly with Ling Han. Everyone was struck with amazement. Ling Han was unarmed now, so if he unleashed a spirit tool, wouldn't he immediately have the advantage? Too frightening. How could there be such a kick-ass flower blossom tier elite? Cho Fei and the other 4 men were dreadfully pale. If the Wind Moon sect won this battle, they would definitely be doomed. However, if Ling Han won, would he let them go since they forced Ling Han to go die earlier? Death left and right, then what were they staying for? They stepped back and wanted to slip away, and as for that Restore Heaven Academy, they'd go next year. Hung, where do you guys think you're going? Hunyo placed her hands on her hips, with an ominous glint burning in her eyes. Kanyi held his long saber horizontally, brimming with killing intent. If it were Kanyi alone, then the 5 of them together would charge head-on, but adding Hunyo, they could only give up immediately. Cho Zifei forced a smile, and said, Kanyi, what are you suggesting? They already had fallen out anyway, so Kanyi simply showed his hands, and said, before young Master Han decides, no one is allowed to leave. Young Master Han? Lingyun. Cho Zifei and the others now knew that Lingyun wasn't that person's real name, but they were also extremely unfamiliar with the appellation Young Master Han. Could this person be called Ling Han or Han Yun? They didn't seem to have ever heard it. Kanyi, are you going to be ungrateful and turn on us? Cho Zifei immediately shouted. We were the ones that accepted you into this circle, and this is how you repay us? What a base person. Seng Jian Sen also rebuked. Kanyi smiled grimly, and said, then what should I do not to be a base person? Let us leave. Yu Yuan Ming said hurriedly. He believed that Kanyi should be able to persuade Hunyo. A bunch of cowards clinging abjectly to life. I'm ashamed to associate with you guys, Kanyi said coldly, and his killing intent became even fiercer. Kanyi, everyone's friends, let it go. He Lan Yun stood out to mediate. She proceeded from the overall situation. After all, the 6 of them came from the same place, and everyone's backers were connected in countless ways. Right. Cho Zifei nodded and suddenly attacked, detaining He Lan Yun and pressing a blade against her neck. Let us go immediately, or else this woman will die here. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.